Chapter 2361. Taking advantage of the chaos, the little fellow rolled on the ground and nimbly rolled out of the crowd. But on the other hand, Naas, who was completely engrossed in the battle with the scorpion-tailed beast, didn't even notice that something was missing from his chest. Roar! Lord Jojo ran wildly on the ice as if he was in high spirits. As soon as he opened his mouth to make a sound, he immediately realized that something was wrong and wished that he could hit himself on the head. Fuck, why are you so excited? What are you shouting for? The most important thing now was to keep a low profile. Let them fight. Fight. Continue fighting. Jojo grabbed the snow domain divine flower with his mouth and hid in a crack in the ice with a whoosh. Akira turned around and saw this scene. Shocked, she shrieked, "Little bastard, you actually dared to steal the flower." A wave of spiritual energy shot over and exploded at Jojo's feet with a bang. Stinking woman. With a whoosh, Lord Si Chiao quickly jumped from one crack in the ice layer to another. Then, with the snow domain divine flower in her mouth, she ran for her life and ran away. That appearance and that figure were absolutely stunning. Ollie turned around when he heard the sound and saw the little fellow's figure. The corners of his mouth twitched, and he was so angry that he laughed. It's quite clever. It's a fisherman taking advantage of the situation, right? I'll chase it. That little bastard, don't even think about running away. Akira took out a bow, an arrow from her inner world. Glaring angrily, she chased in the direction of Arbor with a whoosh. At the same time, Naas summoned the sword of Hades from his conscious. With a flash of light, it pierced through the beast's head and stabbed it back and forth a dozen times. The beast roared heavily, its voice reaching the horizon. Then, its entire body went limp and collapsed, smashing into the thick ice with a boom. This layer of ice instantly emitted a GGG sound, one after another, of shattering sounds. Because the commotion was too big, it alarmed the Sangzhou Emperor in the distant camp. The Emperor ordered a few subordinates to scout for information. The Nether Yas summoned the sword of Nether Deity and chopped the giant beast into pieces. His body swayed along with it. Ollie hurriedly reached out to support her. The giant beast smashed through the layer of ice under its feet. Everyone was horrified to find that cracks were spreading out from under their feet like a spiderweb. Let's go. Mayas roared loudly, leading everyone in a mad dash forward. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Ollie yelled. The ice under their feet continued to shatter. Everyone raised their chi and flew forward. Only then did Ming Yas remember that Lil Thing had already disappeared from his bosom. When he looked up again, he saw a snow-white little guy struggling to escape through the cracks in the ice. More importantly, she was holding a snow domain divine flower in her mouth. At this moment, Ming Yas was angered to the point of laughter by this little thing. He's quite greedy. Even at the last moment of his life, this guy still refused to let go of the snow domain divine flower in his mouth, running for his life in a hurry. His lips curled into a sneer. Little guy, you've really pissed me off. Akira took the lead and chased after the little guy, shooting several arrows in succession. The corners of Ali's eyes couldn't help but twitch. It was mainly because he saw that the little beast in front of him was actually moving in a very coquettish manner. The S-shaped path it took was simply breathtaking. Chapter 2362. However, she leaped into a crack in the ice wall and popped out with her head raised. All of Akira's arrows landed on the ice, so how could they hit her? Akira, on the other hand, was infuriated. She followed behind the little critter and cursed incessantly. She angrily roared, "Stop right there, little beast. Bah, you'd be an idiot if you stopped. How many freaking arrows have you shot already?" "A total of 12 arrows. This miss has formed a grudge with you. Just you wait. When Miss recovers her female form, I'll fucking press you to death." "Oh whoa, oh whoa." The little wolf cub's howls kept coming out of the little critter's mouth. The corners of Ali's eyes twitched uncontrollably. He turned to look at his expressionless and uncertain elder brother and coughed lightly. "Big brother, I think this little critter is quite nimble. Don't tell me you ordered it to take this snowfield divine flower. Get out of the way first. Styx glanced at him indifferently. The look in his eyes was as if he was looking at an idiot. It couldn't be any more obvious. Ollie rubbed his nose with a helpless expression. The remaining 800 personal guards also took out bows and arrows from their inner worlds and aimed in the direction Arbor was fleeing. Wait, for some reason, Styx's heart couldn't help but skip a beat, and he subconsciously reached out to stop his stupid subordinates. The stupid guards all stopped what they were doing and looked at His Highness with a stunned expression. Was His Highness going to let this little critter go? But they had fought so hard for so long and lost 200 to 300 brothers. Were they going to let this trash little critter take advantage of them when they finally plucked the snowfield divine flower? Akir, who was running at the front, was about to go crazy from JoJo's anger. Every time she shot an arrow, it either nailed into the ice or bounced back. After shooting more than 10 arrows in a row to no avail, she was so angry that she snapped the bow in her hand in two and threw it on the ground. The ice beneath her feet rumbled and swayed, and then it suddenly cracked. Akir reflexively flew up. With a furious roar, she pounced toward Arbor, who was in the crevice of the ice. Damn woman! JoJo, Sama was furious. She turned her head and glared angrily at Akir with her round black beady eyes. Then, with a leap, she moved from one crack to another. He stared with a slight chill in his heart. Akir had shattered the crack in the ice where he had been crouching. Fuck! If it wasn't for the fact that I ran away quickly, I would have turned into minced meat by now. You bitch. JoJo, Sama will remember you. In the future, I will definitely make you return everything to JoJo. Wow. She pounced and dodged another attack. When she landed, her hind legs couldn't help but twitch. Holding the snow domain divine flower in its mouth, it turned its head and looked at its leg claws. He couldn't help but vomit blood from anger. His wound had been wrapped in gauze for less than a day. After being chased all the way here, it had split open again. This weak chicken body, JoJo hated it. Woo woo woo. Yas coldly watched for a while before catching up to Akir and saying coldly, Wait, what are you waiting for, Brother Yas? Are you still going to protect this lowly little dumb beast? It's a thief, a thief. Akir shrieked. She had chased it all the way, but she couldn't even kill a little dumb beast. This dealt a huge blow to Akir's spirit. She was about to go crazy from anger. In any case, she had successfully broken through to the spiritual realm with the help of spiritual herbs and elixirs. Moreover, she had mastered a kind of earth spiritual power. Chapter 2363. But now, she couldn't even deal with a country bumpkin little critter. She was really going to be angered to death. Yasi knew what she was thinking. Wasn't she just flying into a rage out of humiliation? Useless fellow, getting angry at a little critter that hasn't even gained sentience. Yasi impatiently waved her away and coldly gazed at Arbor, who was hiding in a crack in the ice. Come here. Bah. Do you think I can pounce on you like a puppy just because you call out to me? Miss Chow coldly gazed at Yasi in front of her, calculating her escape route. She was small, and there were cracks in the ice everywhere. She could just slip in and hide for a while. Let's see how he'll catch her. But with her injured leg, she really couldn't run anymore. Unless she wanted to be legless for the rest of her life. Bah. She didn't want to be trapped in this weak little critter's body for the rest of her life. She wanted to return. Unable to understand what was flickering in this little being's eyes, Yasi impatiently shouted, I advise you to hurry up and come here. I know you can understand human language. Understand your sister. Whoosh. Xiao Mu darted up and nimbly rolled and pressed into a crevice in a flash. Wait. Yasi's pupils contracted slightly. With a crisp crack, the ice layer, which had already stopped moving, began to crack even more violently, as though JoJo had triggered a mechanism. Damn it! Yasi was anxious and angry, but he also felt an inexplicable sense of amusement. This little critter knew quite a lot. It actually chose the weakest part of the ice to stomp on. Under the shaking, everyone had no choice but to rise into the air again. Akir also jumped into the air with everyone and looked down at the little critter who was scurrying back and forth on the ice layer. She was so angry that her pretty face was flushed red. Little critter, you're doing this on purpose. Yasi coldly gazed at the little critter on the ice layer, and a divine power suddenly circled around his hand. A strong suction force squeezed toward Arbor. Miss Chow had been sucked by him many times, so she was already on guard. When she saw him raise his hand, she shrank into one of the ice caves and slid over like a mole. From another cave, she popped her head out with a whoosh. Ming Yasi was speechless. He had the urge to choke her to death and stew her soup. What should he do? This little guy is too hateful. It was so hateful that it made him gnash his teeth in anger. Jojo did not care about his expression. Instead, he slid from one cave to the other and soon disappeared from everyone's sight. Chase! Dark Yass gritted his teeth and roared in a low voice. If he were to let this little fellow slip away right under his nose, then he wouldn't be able to survive. Aolo! The little guy's little ears twitched as he listened to the sound of galloping hooves from afar. Someone was coming. Although she didn't know if it was a friend or foe, she still inexplicably rolled towards the source of the sound. That's right. Basically, get lost. Fuck, Jojo was about to die from anger. To think that she, the great Jojo, had to roll in order to protect her short legs, which were about to become crippled. She might as well roll fast. There were many caves in the broken ice here. She zigzagged from cave to cave, and her speed and agility made Alex and the others gasp in amazement. This little mink had become an immortal. Everyone cursed in their hearts. How could there be such a nimble mink? Chapter 2364. How is this still a ferret? This was simply a divine ferret. Sir Jojo rolled about and finally sensed that the sound of hooves was getting closer and closer to her. When she looked up, she was so moved that tears almost streamed down her face. Fuck, it was Duanyu. Duanyu came to save her. Duanyu, woo, Duanyu. The little fellow rolled all the way over, but she still didn't forget to hold that snow domain divine flower in her mouth that, with a leap, she hurriedly pounced at Duanyu's handsome face, who was dashing over. Ow! It was Duanyu. He was her big brother. Hurry and save me, did Sir Jojo's pounce just so happened to land on Duanyu's nose, causing him to almost suck in a mouthful of fur. Duanyu hastily pulled that little fellow off his face and looked down in bewilderment. He happened to meet her pair of clever, beady black eyes. This was a ferret? But wasn't this ferret's gaze a bit too rich? Looking at her wet eyes, he saw a pitiful look. She raised her little head and stared straight at him. That gaze was filled with the expression of, I finally found my biological brother I haven't seen in 800 years. Duanyu couldn't help but twitch his mouth. He felt that this ferret's gaze was very playful. Moreover, when their gazes met, Duanyu was inexplicably stunned by her gaze. Seriously, what the hell? Duanyu didn't have the energy to retort, but his slender fingers picked up the little fellow. Then he saw the transparent, glazed, spherical flower in the little fellow's mouth. Wait a minute. Wasn't this the Snow Domain Divine Flower? He knew that the Snow Domain Divine Flower would lose its attacking power after being plucked. But the problem was, where did this weak beast pluck the Snow Domain Divine Flower? Could it be that she wasn't as weak as she looked? Duanyu reflexively reached out to take the Snow Domain Divine Flower in her mouth. Our dear Xiao Mu immediately shrunk back defensively and glared indignantly at Duanyu with a pair of accusatory eyes. Damn, Duanyu, Sir Jojo misjudged you. You actually want to fight. Tribulation. Want. Black. Eat. Black. Duanyu inexplicably sensed a trace of disdain and contempt from the depths of her eyes, and he couldn't help chuckling. He reflexively raised his hand to pat her small head. At the same time, the ice layer finally stopped shaking. It was just that this ice layer had turned from smooth and flat to broken pieces full of scars and cracks. If one was not careful, one could fall through the cracks. Ming Yasi chased over with his men, and he immediately saw the little beast curled up in Duanyu's hand. After sizing up Duanyu with his dark eyes, Ming Yasi sneered and said, So it's Sangzhou's Prince Chun. Duanyu looked up at him with an indifferent expression. Your Highness the Underworld State's Crown Prince? I've heard a lot about you. The two of them looked cold and distant, as if they were meeting for the first time. Stop pretending. Don't you guys know each other? Jojo retorted inwardly. She subconsciously pulled at Duan Yu's palm and jumped into his arms with a swish. Still holding the snow domain divine flower in her mouth, she vigilantly glanced at Akir, who was glaring at her across from her. Stinking woman, what are you glaring at? Ming Yasi's eyes flashed with a trace of anger that he himself didn't notice as he watched the little weakling shrink into Duan Yu's arms and abandon him. For some reason, he just didn't feel comfortable in his heart. He was clearly the one who discovered this little weakling first, so why should someone else beat him to it? Chapter 2365. Prince Chun, I'm truly sorry. My family's little beast is rather mischievous. It scampers everywhere and isn't shy with strangers. Please return it to me. Yasi coldly said to Duan Yu while suppressing his anger. Duan Yu looked down at the weak mink holding the flower in his arms before looking up to glance at Yasi. Do you have proof? What? Yasi only felt a surge of anger from the bottom of his heart, and his entire person also turned cold. I said, what proof do you have to prove that she's your little beast? Yasi gritted his teeth. What the hell could this ownerless little beast use as proof? This was merely a low-level mystic realm little beast. Who knew if it had surpassed level 3 mystic beasts? Proof? He clearly knew that it was impossible to prove, yet he said such things. This Duan Yu was indeed unbelievably cunning. Arbor hid in Duan Yu's arms and repeatedly nodded its little head in support of Duan Yu. That's right. What proof do you have to prove that this Lord Xiao is your beast? If you don't have proof, Scram. Akir placed her hands on her hips and shouted angrily. Whoever wants this little beast can take it away. But we sacrificed many people's lives to obtain that Snow Domain's divine flower with great difficulty. It must be returned to its rightful owner. It turned out that this little fellow had obtained this Snow Domain's divine flower in passing. Oh, no. It was in passing. As a habitual offender, how could Miss Xiao return the flower in her mouth to someone else? That was absolutely impossible. Her beady black eyes stared vigilantly at Akira across from her. That look of his shocked everyone in the room that this truly was an exotic mink. They had never seen such a greedy mink. You're just a low-level little mystic beast. How could you chew this Snow Domain's divine flower? Why don't you try? They could even write their names backwards if they didn't make you explode and die in minutes. Little furball, come here. Duan Yu extended a hand in front of the little ferret. Miss Xiao's eyes instantly brimmed with fury. That gaze was simply ruthless. This damn Duan Yu was itching for a beating. What kind of nickname did he give her? What kind of freaking name was Little Furball? Also, he actually stared at her so directly. He actually extended his hand toward her with the Snow Domain's divine flower in his mouth. Shameless. He wanted to rob Jojo's Snow Domain's divine flower again. Duan Yu, I was wrong about you. You actually dared to rob Lord Jojo. The little ferret's furious gaze made Duan Yu somewhat embarrassed. Inexplicably, he explained to her, look, this Snow Domain divine flower loves the cold. Now that you're holding in your mouth, its stem and leaves are wilting. It's going to die soon. A pair of black bean eyes glanced at the flower. Sure enough, the flower was wilted and looked like it was about to wither. Weakling. Jojo cursed in his heart. You're so weak. How can you have the face to be a saint medicine? Although he was cursing in his heart, he still couldn't bear it. He could not let such a rare divine flower of the snow region die. Sir Jojo looked up at Duan Yu with a don't-lie expression. He glared at Duan Yu with his beady eyes. Duan Yu said in amusement, don't worry, I'll store this Snow Domain's divine flower in a jade box for you. I won't snatch it from you. This is your Snow Domain's divine flower. It was only then that Jojo nodded and spat the flower into his hand. There were even a few drops of suspicious liquid hanging from the flower stem. It was sparkling and translucent. Duan Yu secretly twitched his mouth. Chapter 2366. With a lift of his wrist, he placed that Snow Domain's divine flower into a long jade box. He grinned as he waved the jade box in front of the little fellow. Do you want to pick it up? Pick your sister. Are you retarded? Who wants to pick up an ice-cold jade box? It's longer than her ball-like body. This guy was definitely mocking her on purpose. Don't be fooled by how she was usually all smiles and looked like she would laugh at anyone. In reality, she was very wicked. Then leave it with me, for now. Duan Yu was still grinning as he withdrew his fingers and stored this jade box into his inner world. Sir Jojo had a bad premonition. Duan Yu's fox-like smile really looked like he wanted to embezzle her snow domain's divine flower. Ow! The little fellow pounced at his face. Duan Yu was already prepared, so he swiftly picked up her small body and stuffed her into his arms with a helpless expression. All right, I'll give it to you when we return. What's the rush? Ming Yasi's handsome face darkened. At his signal with his eyes, a group of personal guards swiftly surrounded Duan Yu in the center. What are you doing? Duan Yu grinned at Ming Yasi's face that was smeared with a layer of charcoal. You want to fight with me? You can take the snow domain's divine flower, but you have to leave my little pet beast behind. Ming Yasi's face was cold, and he practically enunciated every word when he said the last sentence. He simply didn't understand why he had such intense emotions. It was as if he would regret it for the rest of his life if he didn't leave this little pet beast behind. Although he didn't understand why he had such thoughts, he had always been someone who followed his heart. He could just find another snow domain's divine flower if it was gone. But he had to keep this little beast with such a dramatic gaze. Xiao Mu turned to glance at Ming Yasi before swiftly shrinking back into Duan Yu's lapel. Her heart was brimming with anger as she inwardly mused. This Ming Yasi definitely wants to take revenge on Xiao Xiao for stealing his flower. Don't think Jojo doesn't know what he's planning. Don't think of making Jojo go back. Big brother Yas. Akir couldn't help but scream. Akir's eyes were filled with malicious fury as she stared at the little white mink in Duan Yu's arms. She wished for nothing more than to immediately rush up and tear that little beast to shreds. She simply couldn't understand why Yas, who is usually quite wise and far-sighted, would care so much about that little beast. In Yas's eyes, that trash little beast was even more precious than a snow domain divine flower. How could this be? She must be hallucinating. Shut up, Akir. C.I. impatiently shouted at her before turning to glare at Duan Yu and coldly ordering, leave it to me. Duan Yu exuded an indolent aura, and the polar ice wolf he was riding on was very unfriendly as it repeatedly flashed its claws at ACI. Ownerless little beasts are everywhere. They belong to whoever gets their hands on them. Duan Yu giggled as he lowered his head to gently press the little fellow's head. Moreover, she seems to like sticking to me. Bah, arrogant. That was because he had no other choice. The little fellow crawled her claws on his lapel and impatiently urged, hurry up and leave. Don't waste your breath. Hold on. Look at how others look like they want to pick a fight. How can I, the dignified Prince Chun of Cangzhou, boost other people's morale and diminish my own prestige? Ming Yasi angrily drew his sword, a hint of gloom pressing down on his brows. You're courting death. Broken dreams. Chapter 2367. Looking at the fellow in front of him who confidently said, she likes to cling to me more, Ming Yasi was infuriated to the extreme. That's right, as long as one wasn't blind, they could see that this little beast was indeed clinging tightly to Duan Yu's clothes with a begging to be taken away expression on its face. Of course, this begging to be taken away was purely Ming Yasi's conjecture. Just seeing that dumb beast snuggling in Duan Yu's arms and warily looking at him with its beady black eyes made Ming Yasi's displeasure boil to the extreme. Bang! The sword in his hand slashed out a stream of air that abruptly exploded under Duan Yu's feet. Who exactly is the one courting death? Duan Yu leaped up with a grin. The two of them leaped onto a protruding ice wall at the speed of light and exchanged over 100 blows without any explanation. Duan Yu was never one to suffer a loss. Since the other party had already drawn their swords at him, how could he compromise and yield? Instead, it was Miss Xiao who inexplicably broke out in a cold sweat for him. Be more reliable. Duan Yu, you mustn't lose this, Lord Xiao. She wasn't willing to go back with that exposing maniac, Yasi. The little fellow shrunk her head as she calculated Duan Yu's chances of winning. Duan Yu was alone right now, while the other party had more than 800 personal guards. This was clearly a huge disparity in strength. In addition, who knew what Ming Yasi ate as he grew up, but his cultivation had soared so much. She didn't even know if Duan Yu was his match. If Duan Yu couldn't defeat this Yasi, could it be that she would be captured by this Ming province's crown prince? When the two of them met earlier, one of them eccentrically called out His Highness Prince Chun, while the other called out Ming province's crown prince in a strange tone. In the past, she really didn't expect that Duan Yu was actually the Zhangzhou's emperor's son who had wandered outside. Furthermore, this Yasi's true identity as the Aikido tribe's young chief was actually that Ming province's crown prince. While the little fellow was pondering, Duan Yu and Ming Yasi had already exchanged several hundred blows. Both of them leaped from the smooth ice wall to a place filled with icicles. While exchanging blows with spiritual energy, they also had to constantly pay attention to the situation beneath their feet. Miss Qiao was somewhat surprised. Sure enough, when her cultivation was rising, everyone's cultivation was rising as well. She didn't need to worry about Duan Yu at all. This fellow hadn't even used his full strength yet, but he still had the strength to fight Ming Yas. After exchanging a few more blows, Duan Yu withdrew his hand dispiritedly and said indifferently, "What kind of power did you use earlier? You've already sustained internal injuries. Right now, you should be returning to cultivate and meditating instead of continuing this unrealistic battle with me." MHM. Xiao Mu poked her small head out and nodded in deep agreement. ACI glared at Duan Yu, his gaze involuntarily turning furious. Without another word, he reached out to grab Miss Qiao's small head. This was simply unreasonable. Miss Qiao glared at him angrily and with a whoosh. She shrank her head back. Duan Yu couldn't resist laughing, and he abruptly swung out a water spirit whip to block Ming Yasi's attack. At the same time, a group of Zhangzhou guards who came with him also arrived. When they saw that their master was actually in conflict with that group from the Ming province, they hastily ran over to help. For a moment, the two sides were at daggers drawn. Duan Yu sneered, "If you still don't retreat, I'm going to get serious." Chapter 2368. You should have been serious a long time ago. Miss Qiao swept him a disgruntled glance as she mused. "Hurry and deal with him so we can go home." Duan Yu lowered his head to glance at the little fellow. He saw her pair of small, black eyes staring straight at him. Her watery eyes were quite amusing. "You're hungry, right?" "Hungry my ass." Miss Qiao couldn't be bothered with this idiot anymore. Yet Duan Yu was grinning as he suddenly stomped the ground. Tens of thousands of icicles exploded in an instant and were turned into balls of ice by the airflow around him. They flew up with a whoosh and split open between the two with a bang. Countless ice shards shattered into tiny ice shards that shot toward Dark Yas. Miss Qiao could see everything clearly from hiding in his arms, and she couldn't help but gasp in amazement. Duan Yu, this guy, actually grasped the power of water spirit to the point of perfection. Seeing how he effortlessly converted the water spirit energy between heaven and earth for his own use, this person was simply a bit of a freak. Even Dark Yas at his peak might not be his match, let alone the current Dark Yas who couldn't even stand steadily. "Your Highness!" Akir had already cried out in alarm. Ali brought a few guards with him and flew up to support the swaying Dark Yas. Dark Yas's face was dark, but he was extremely furious on the inside. If it weren't for the fact that he had used the power of the sword of underworld deity earlier, and his body had yet to recover, how could he have suffered such a setback in front of Duan Yu? But right now, he was frustrated no matter what he said. If he couldn't win, he couldn't win. He already knew that he couldn't protect what he wanted if he wasn't strong enough. Dark Yas angrily swatted away Ali's hand and jumped down from the ice wall with Duan Yu. He reflexively covered his chest with his hand. Duan Yu turned around and coldly swept him a glance. The Sangzhou guards had already swarmed up to protect their master in the center. Although they only had half the number of Ming province's personal guards, their fierce eyes were extremely sharp. It was as if each of them could take on 100 enemies alone, and they were brimming with a baleful aura. Ming province's crown prince. Today's exchange of pointers was to this prince's liking. Let's play again next time if there's a chance. Duan Yu waved his hand with a nonchalant expression as he turned to leave with the little fellow in his arms. The Sangzhou guards were naturally not as magnanimous as their master. Each and every one of the Dark Province guards who were glaring at them like tigers watching their prey turned around in a row and retreated in a row. They stared at the Dark Province guards in front of them and protected their masters as they left. Of course, they were not very afraid that the people of the underworld continent would attack. Unless they wanted to die here, they could just attack. The heavenly ice and snow region was within the territory of the Tsang state. It would be strange if the people of the underworld state dared to make a move. If they hurt Prince Chun, the emperor could send an army to crush them at any time. Ming Yas wasn't a fool. He had already thought of this. At this moment, she was staring at Duan Yu's group, leaving with gloomy eyes. She clutched her arm that had been cut by the water spirit. His arm was not the only thing that was injured. In the last confrontation, just now, that damn Prince Chun was indeed a powerful figure. Akir's eyes were red, and she looked like she was about to cry. Brother Yas, why were you so impulsive? She clearly knew that now was not the right time to fight with the people of the Sangzhou. So why couldn't she keep her cool? Ming Yas coldly glanced at her before looking in the direction that Duan Yu left in a trance. He didn't speak for a long time. Chapter 2369. Seeing that Yasi didn't chase after her, Miss Chow inwardly sighed in relief. This guy was extremely troublesome. If she allowed him to continue pestering her, the one who would be annoyed would be her true self. Right now, her tiny body couldn't do anything. She was too weak to even jump up and scratch his face. Right now, her most important task was to find a place to settle down and sort out her current situation so that she could get herself dressed as soon as possible. Arbor sighed powerlessly in her heart as she looked down at her chubby little paw. Go do what you need to do. Duan Yu aloofly instructed the Sangzhou guards before bending down to enter the tent. He placed the little thing on a small table before his gaze landed on her injured little paw. Due to the torment along the way, the gauze had long fallen off, so her little paw was currently exposed to the air. Although it wasn't bleeding anymore, it still hurt terribly. Your Highness, Xiao Kezi anxiously called out upon hearing the commotion. MHM. Duan Yu didn't even look up when he heard his call. He merely took out a medicine bottle from his inner world and placed the little thing on his lap. He then lowered his head and applied medicine for her, as if no one else was around. Arbor glanced at that medicine bottle and stopped moving. She obediently lay there and allowed him to apply the medicine. This medicine was her exclusive prescription, and it was very effective. After applying it once today and again tomorrow, her injury would probably be 80% healed. Your Highness. When Xiao Kezi saw that Duan Yu was ignoring him, he hastily walked forward and circled Duan Yu's body several times. My Highness. All right, stop making a fuss. If you have something to say, say it. This servant heard that you encountered the Nether Province guards this time and almost met with danger, right? Xiao Kezi wailed. You really were in too much danger. Duan Yu carefully applied the medicine for the little fellow before looking up to meet his eyes. I'm fine. The implication was, stop making a fuss over there. Arbor also felt that this little eunuch was terribly noisy. She was lying there lazily. After fleeing for her life the entire way, she had long used up all the energy in her body. Right now, she just wanted to have a good rest, but there was a demonic voice nagging in her ears. How annoying. Fourth brother. A voice sounded from outside the tent. Not long after, two men walked in one after another with smiles on their faces. Duan Yu raised his eyes to look at those two people. He was smiling sarcastically on the inside, but he didn't show any expression on his face. Second royal brother, third royal brother, is something the matter? The second prince and the third prince looked at each other. The third prince smiled and said, I heard that you met with danger on the way. Are you all right? Duan Yu spread his hands. It's obvious that she's not injured. She's completely fine. That's good, that's good. The third prince laughed and glanced outside the tent. I don't know where Xiang Chong heard the news of your injury. She's so nervous that she's secretly crying. You have to comfort her later. Xiang Chong, come in. The woman who entered after hearing the sound had red eyes, as if she had just cried. She was dressed in a fiery red muslin robe and had a tall, jade-like nose. Her appearance was quite stunning. A phoenix hairpin wrapped with 8 jewels on her head was quite eye-catching under the swaying sunlight. The little fellow was lying there. She looked up at that beauty in red and sized her up curiously before looking away and continuing to laze around. Chapter 2370. Brother Ollie. Commandery Princess Xiangchang called out with reddened eyes. She sized him up from head to toe. Thank goodness you're all right. Xiangchang was worried to death. Duan Yu blinked and absent-mindedly swept a glance at that Commandery Princess. Many thanks for the Commandery Princess's concern, but it's better for the Commandery Princess to call me His Highness Prince Chun. When Xiangchang heard this, half of her eyes immediately reddened again. She lowered her head and bit her lip, looking hurt. The third prince hastily smoothed things over. Fourth brother, that's not right. Xiangchang is the only daughter of Marquis Anqing. Marquis Anqing was conferred the title of Marquis by grandfather's generation, so he's quite related to our imperial family. That's right. We grew up with Xiangchang, so how can you treat her as an outsider? The second prince also interjected dryly. Miss Qiao, who was lying on the side to watch the show, only felt that the 3 people before her were all idiots. As expected, Duan Yu slapped her in the face with the next sentence. That's you guys. Duan Yu swept a sardonic glance at his 2 elder brothers before his chilly gaze landed on Commandery Princess Xiangchang. I'm not familiar with her. The second prince and the third prince were choked to the point of speechlessness. Wasn't that true? This fourth brother had just returned to Sangzhou not long ago. It was them and Xiangchang who grew up together, not fourth brother and Xiangchang. When they thought of this, the second and third princes could only awkwardly rub their noses and chuckle. Ha! Duan Yu reached out to pick up the little fellow who was sprawled on the table, causing her to glare at him in displeasure. She was lying here perfectly fine, so what was there to pick her up for? Don't think you can pick her up casually just because she's young. Duan Yu glanced at her with a grin and ignored her gaze. He turned around with her in his arms and threw a sentence at the second and third princes. If there's nothing else, my royal brothers, I'm going to rest. This was in order to chase them out. A trace of anger flashed across the 2 princes' faces. They were increasingly displeased with this unbridled fourth brother. However, they couldn't say anything right now. They could only hatefully fling their sleeves and growl at Xiangchang. Xiangchang, let's go. How could Xiangchang Commandery Princess's eyes shift away from Duan Yu? At this moment, she was staring at him with infatuation. How could she hear the second prince and the third prince's cries? When those 2 people saw Xiangchang's love-struck appearance, they were even more infuriated, so they simply abandoned her and left Duan Yu's tent, slamming down the curtain. Ungrateful fellow. The third prince spat as soon as he stepped out of the door. They had come to see him in vain. They didn't expect him to be so rude to his elder brother. Second prince remained silent with a dark expression. He was naturally displeased with Duan Yu in his heart. However, with his current status and the importance he received from Imperial Father, even if he wanted to make a move on him, he would have to assess the situation and plan before making a move. If he acted rashly, it would only make him more unlucky. Xiangchang? Let her be, the second prince said coldly. He was not very optimistic about that woman from Xiangchang. Just by looking at his fourth brother's cold attitude towards her, he knew that there was no chance. Unfortunately, that woman's brain wasn't good. She insisted on sticking to him and asking for humiliation. So be it. She would soon find out who was more suitable for her. If it weren't for giving face to Marquis and Xingho, he wouldn't care about a mere Xiangchang. The second prince thought coldly as he left with the third prince. However, The two people didn't know that Crown Prince Rong Li was currently standing in a corner of the tent wearing a thick brocade cloak and coldly watching them leave. Chapter 2371. Duan Yu sat down with the little fellow in his arms and examined her tiny paws that were smeared with medicine. A voice suddenly rang out beside him. "Brother Ali, what is this? Is this a mink? It's prey that you brought back, right? It's quite cute. Can I touch it?" Duan Yu furrowed his brows at the string of voices, and he rudely blocked Xiangchang's hand. He asked dryly, "Why haven't you left yet?" Xiangchang Commandery Princess's eyes immediately reddened from grievance. Her lips quivered as she sniffed and cried pitifully, "Brother Ali, I—" Duan Yu felt all the hairs on his body stand on end. Unexpectedly, the fur ball in his arms also stood on end. It was mainly because Xiao Mu felt that this woman's voice was clearly coarse, but she still had to tighten her voice and pretend to be weak and easily bullied. This made her hair stand on end. Duan Yu looked up and finally glanced at this Xiangchang Commandery Princess. The latter was secretly delighted and put on a gentle expression as she looked back at him with watery eyes. Xiao Mu's body trembled, and she could even feel Duan Yu, who was hugging her, also trembling. The Xiangchang Commandery Princess naturally did not notice the two people's identical actions. Duan Yu, who sensed something, looked down at that furball in amusement. "Xiangchang, this prince is going to rest. Wasn't this eviction order obvious enough? As long as one had a bit of foresight, they should be able to scram obediently." However, Xiangchang Commandery Princess was an oddball. She was secretly happy that she finally had a chance to be alone with Prince Chun, so she pretended not to understand Duan Yu's words and naturally could not leave. Miss Qiao, who was exhausted from the day, stretched out her paws and yawned rather sleepily. Xiangchang Commandery Princess's eyes instantly widened as if she had seen a ghost. She pointed at Arbor in Duan Yu's arms and exclaimed, "It Brother Ali actually knows how to yawn." Duan Yu, who was thinking that the little fellow was very adorable, only heard Xiangchang Commandery Princess's coarse voice. He felt it was ear-piercing, and anger involuntarily flitted across his eyes. Little Ku, this little eunuch, when she needed him, he was nowhere to be found. When she didn't need him, he would be noisy all day long. He was really useless. When Lil Kuzi saw the second and third princes enter, he very consciously retreated and gave the space to his masters. However, he naturally did not dare to walk far. When he heard Duan Yu shout, he hastily dashed inside the tent. "Your Highness, chase away all the irrelevant people. I'm going to sleep." Xiao Kuzi was dumbfounded. He secretly glanced at Xiangchang Commandery Princess, whose expression had changed greatly. This princess had probably offended His Highness by courting death. Xiao Kuzi braced himself and walked forward. Following his master's orders, he coughed lightly and said, "Count, Princess, please." According to Xiangchang Commandery Princess's temper, she should have slapped Xiao Kezi's face and given him a slap while shouting at him, "Are you blind? Don't you know who I am?" However, when she saw Duan Yu's aloof expression, she did not dare to do anything. She could not do anything. She could only turn to look at him with a very sad expression. "Brother Ali, I said to call me Prince Chun." Duan Yu's good temper was instantly worn away by this whatever Commandery Princess, so he bluntly said, "I'm really not that familiar with you." Chapter 2372. Xiangchang Commandery Princess looked like she had suffered a huge blow and endured humiliation. She covered her face and sobbed as she left. After she left Duan Yu's tent and returned to her own, she hugged her pillow and cried bitterly, scaring the maidservants. Duan Yu naturally didn't know that Xiangchang Commandery Princess went back and cried. But even if he knew, he would only scold her for being crazy and nothing more. After Xiangchang Commandery Princess was chased away, Duan Yu carried Sir Jojo to the couch and sat down. He indeed wanted to rest for a while after going through so much trouble outside. His head hurt, especially from their quarreling just now. Arbor glanced at him with a sharp gaze, which amused Duan Yu. He reached out to poke her little furry face. Little dumpling. Arbor simply turned the back of her head towards him and couldn't be bothered to say anything else to him. Wait until she returned to her original state. Then she would thrash him to death. Duanyu didn't continue to disturb her either. He watched as she curled up in a tiny ball and soon fell asleep from exhaustion. He then also closed his eyes. Arbor didn't know that while she was asleep, that tiny ball of Martin's body was emitting a glazed luster. It was as if her entire body had turned transparent. Her soul floated out of the little white Martin's body on its own and hovered in midair. There was a flow of air that couldn't be seen with the naked eye inside her dantian that was slowly rotating. Her entire body hovered there very smoothly as she unconsciously absorbed the spiritual energy that was surging in from all directions. And the spiritual energy was advancing at a very minute speed, slowly transforming into spiritual conscious and gushing towards her forehead. Everything was done so naturally that the little fellow didn't need to worry about it herself. It was as if this body had already become the source of all living things in the world. In reality, what Arbor didn't know was that most of the time when she floated over, she was unconscious and fell into this kind of independent cultivation state. She also didn't know that the spiritual conscious body stayed in her conscious like a lazy person who had eaten and drank to its heart's content. It was sprawled out on all fours and didn't want to move at all. This time. The cultivation lasted for 4 hours. When Duanyu, who was beside her, moved slightly, the little white Martin's spiritual conscious body returned to her body. The transparent spirit body was once again absorbed into the little white Martin's body. It was as if everything that had just happened was just a dream and an illusion. Xiaomu had no idea that she had already inexplicably gone through another round of cultivation. She opened her small black eyes and saw the guy beside her. He was leaning on one arm and poking her round little belly with a grin. "Bah, what are you poking at?" The little guy flipped over like a carp and got up. He moved his little paws and felt that the pain was much better. He couldn't help but feel proud in his heart. Jojo, Sama's medicine was really good. Jojo's products were definitely the best. Duanyu looked at her with a grin and rubbed her furry little body. "Little furball, what do you want to eat?" For some reason, he just wanted to talk to her. This little guy could understand human language, and it was also very human-like. Although it was only a low-level little Xian beast, she didn't know why its intelligence was so heaven-defying. There were too many bizarre things in this world, so Duanyu naturally wouldn't delve into these. Roar! Puffed! Duanyu couldn't resist laughing out loud. He felt that his mood had become much more cheerful. He stood up and hugged this round little thing before getting off the couch. He said to Xiao Kezi, who was waiting outside the door, "Set the table." Xiao Kezi was overjoyed. In the past, Their Highness wouldn't remember to eat without someone reminding him. Today, the sun must have risen from the west. Chapter 2373. Once all the food was served, the little fellow leaped onto the table. Xiao Kezi was dumbfounded as he waved his hand to chase it away, but Duanyu calmly stopped him. "All right, you can leave." "Ah, Your Highness, this little critter, it's fine." Xiao Kezi looked at Miss Qiao with a strange expression. That mink was squatting in front of a plate of pork ribs and looking at its little paws with a conflicted expression. It looked like it was hesitating whether to use its paws to eat or to lift it up to eat. This really was an odd little mink. Xiao Kezi thought, how could it share food with His Highness at the table? It was so dirty, yet His Highness didn't mind. Xiao Kezi grumbled in his mind as he slowly walked out. The moment he stepped out, he saw the little snow eagle's paw decisively reaching for the plate. "Oh, woo!" Duanyu, who was picking up a pair of chopsticks, looked speechlessly at the little fellow who was barking at him. For some reason, he had the misconception that this little fellow was used to ordering him around. "Oh, woo!" Duanyu twitched his mouth and put down the chopsticks in his hand. He stood up and walked to the little fellow's side. He lifted her up and walked to the basin on the side of the tent. "Where did you get this bad habit of yours?" A little animal actually knew to wash its paws before eating. "Oh, woo!" The little fellow barked at him again and looked disdainfully at the water in the basin. It was a dirty basin of water, disgusting. Duanyu, what was going on? He felt like this little fellow was like a lord in front of him. Who exactly was His Highness? Xiaokezi. Xiaokezi was waiting outside the tent. When he heard the call, he lifted the curtain and rushed in at the speed of light. Your Highness, did that mink disturb your meal? Do you want this humble one to throw it out? Awoo! Sir Jojo glared at the slanderous fellow who rushed in. Xiaokezi looked like he had seen a ghost. It really was a ghost. This little mink looked so adept at glaring at people. Pour out the water in the basin, Duan Yu said helplessly. Hey, this basin of water was just fetched. It fell. Lilvizi hurriedly carried the basin out and splashed it on the ground. Then, he carried it back and watched with a strange expression as His Highness filled the basin with water again. The corner of little Kezi's mouth twitched. The next moment, he saw His Highness put the small animal into the basin. Ow! Sir Jojo's beady eyes bulged as he stared fixedly at Duan Yu. Duan Yu exclaimed speechlessly, I've really seen a ghost. Why did this Sundara look a little like his Jojo? That was why he found the little guy interesting at first glance. You won't get wet. Duan Yu inexplicably explained, Fine, I'll wash your claws. Only your claws. Little Kezi was completely speechless. What kind of mink was this? He had to change the water before washing his claws, and wash his claws before eating. Was this a human or a ferret? In this day and age, even small animals were more particular than him. A little eunuch? Duan Yu helped little Jojo wash her small claws and used a clean handkerchief to wipe off the water stains. Only then did he put the little guy back on the table. Clack, clack, clack. The little guy even bounced to that plate of spare ribs and picked a bone that was easier for her claws to grab. She lowered her head and gnawed on it. When she saw Duan Yu looking at her with a grin, she even rolled her eyes at him. Chapter 2374. With a turn of her little butt, Sir Jojo used the back of her head to eat him. Duan Yu couldn't resist laughing out loud. He took a pair of chopsticks and took 2 bites. When he saw Lil Kezi standing beside him like a statue, he frowned and said, Why are you standing here foolishly? Your Highness, don't you think this mink is a bit mystical? Of course it's mystical. Duan Yu smiled smugly. Don't you know who adopted this mink? Do you think His Highness, can adopt a normal mink? She couldn't be bothered with the smug Jojo. After eating a bone, she looked at the pot of soup and fretted. In the end, it was Duan Yu who considerately gave her a small plate and poured some soup for her to drink. This solved a huge problem. Lil Kezi felt like he was fucked. Not only did this neurotic mink have a lot of problems before eating, but she was also so anthropomorphic when eating. She was especially particular about not eating dirty plates. The food she was given had to be placed on a new plate. She would glare at you when the soup was hot and shout at you when it was salty. She even had to wash her paws after eating. How was this a freaking mink? This was a little emperor mink, right? After eating and drinking her fill, Miss Xiao ordered Duan Yu to wash herself clean before collapsing on his couch and occupying his bed. This weak mink was only a little mystic beast that wasn't even level 3, so it was awfully weak. It would probably starve to death if it didn't eat for a day. Moreover, little Xiao wanted this weak chicken body to grow up a little after eating and drinking enough. That way, it would be able to run faster and be able to put in more effort when encountering danger. Even if it couldn't win, it should at least have an escape skill, right? When Duan Yu turned around, he saw the little fellow sprawled there motionlessly like she was full and couldn't crawl. He curled his lips in amusement and was about to go up and pick her up to play with when the servants outside the curtain moved. Greetings to your Highness, the noble consort. This consort can go in by herself. Noble consort, Duan's gentle voice rang out, leaving all the palace maids outside. Her personal royal maid opened the curtain for her, and noble consort Duan walked in with a smile. Mom, why have you come? Duan Yu quickly turned around and walked to his mother's side with a grin. What's wrong? Mother heard that you went out to play and encountered danger on the road. Can't I come and see you? Mother, why are you listening to their nonsense? Duan Yu helped his mother sit down on the stool. I, your son, am mighty and domineering. How could a few insignificant thieves injure me? What little thief? I heard that it's the cruel and merciless crown prince of the underworld region. Humph! Duan Yu raised his slender brows non-committally. Just a defeated opponent, not worth mentioning. You child. Noble consort, Duan glared at her son in amusement and anger. You're too proud. Mother, your son, I naturally have the ability to be proud. Duan Yu sat down next to his mother with a grin and reached out to pour tea for her. Little Jojo, on the other hand, had been lying on the bed the whole time. His eyes were wide open and his gaze was fixed on imperial concubine Duan. Noble consort Duan's natural grace, elegance, and gentleness made Miss Qiao feel that the woman in front of her was very elegant. Moreover, this was her first time seeing the way the mother and son interacted with each other. They were mother and son, but they were more like friends. The faint warmth between the two of them made people feel very comfortable. Oh, you've been naughty and mischievous since you were young. Noble consort Duan smiled with pursed lips as she caught sight of the little bundle on the bed from the corner of her eye. Chapter 2375. She stood up and walked towards the side of the bed. Mother, I heard that you caught a little snow eagle. Is it this little one? Duan Yu's body swayed, and he quickly scooped up the little fellow. He hid her in his arms and grumbled, Mom, I can't give this to you. Noble consort Duan laughingly scolded him and poked his shoulder. Look, someone even boasted earlier that everything they hunted would belong to Mom. Duan Yu rubbed his nose and instantly felt a bit embarrassed, but he still tightly protected the little mink in his arms. Just this won't do. Unexpectedly, Miss Qiao kicked him in the chest. Her chubby little body rolled and pounced towards noble consort Duan. Mom, don't be scared, she won't. Duan Yu was startled and wanted to remind his mother that this little mink was quite human, so she probably wouldn't scratch her. Unexpectedly, when he turned around, his mother had already cradled that little thing in her arms and giggled. Son, look, this mink is really interesting. Noble consort Duan looked at this soft and adorable little bundle and laughed happily. Duan Yu glanced at that little mink resentfully, but he felt even more aggrieved when he saw her ignoring him with her, but facing him. This heartless little thing wanted to run off with someone else after feeding her. Arbor rolled around in noble consort Duan's arms. He liked this woman's soft embrace and the faint fragrance on her body. The little fellow's nose twitched as she curled up in noble consort Duan's arms. Her two round, beady eyes sharpened sharply. Son, rest well. Mama's brought you back. Mom. Duan Yu was infuriated and reached out to hug Jojo. Mom, you don't know how to take care of her. My little dumpling has a lot of bad habits. She has to wash her feet before eating, and then I have to help her wash her feet twice after eating. Spit on your face. The little fellow turned around and glared at him with her round eyes. You're the one who washes her feet before eating. Your whole family washes her feet. Mom, MHM, Mom will remember. Mother will treat the little dumpling well. Thank you, son. Mother likes your gift very much. Imperial concubine Duan talked to herself for a while before jokingly snatching the little fellow and running away. She left her son with a face full of resentment and stood in the tent, glaring at her mother, who left her son behind and ran away. She was so angry that she rolled her eyes. Mother, your son didn't say he was going to give it to you. Arbor rolled coquettishly in Imperial consort Duan's arms. It was really strange. She didn't know why, but she liked this noble consort Duan at first glance. It was hard not to like such a gentle and kind woman, Arbor thought. It was better to stay in noble consort Duan's tent at night. Otherwise, a man and a woman alone in a room. Humph, that Duan Yu had taken advantage of her for nothing. Although with her small body, there was no problem of a single man and a single woman. The little fellow's soft and fluffy appearance made it very rare for noble consort Duan. After carrying her back to his place, he personally fed her water and even gave her some pastries to eat. The maidservants on the side had long been petrified. Just like little Kezi, they stared at Arbor with wide eyes, as if they had seen a ghost. They had never seen a mink that could eat pastries before, so their knowledge had been broadened this time. This time, The little fellow really ate until she was stuffed. She didn't sleep well the entire night because she was stuffed. As a result, she was listless and listless the next morning. Duan ran to his mother's tent early in the morning to see her. When he saw her listless appearance, he immediately said that he wanted to carry her back. Chapter 2376. Mom, I already said you can't take good care of her. This little fellow is full of problems and is very precious. Let me carry her back and raise her. Our dear Duan Yu inexplicably didn't sleep well the entire night. Every time he closed his eyes, the little ferret kept hovering in front of him, making him feel anxious and worried. As a result, he ran over here early in the morning without eating breakfast. Noble consort Duan rolled her eyes at her son and slapped away his hand that was reaching for the little ferret. Stingy, you said you were giving it to Mom, but now you want it back. Duan Yu looked at his mother aggrievedly. Mom, don't you feel guilty saying this? When did your son say he was giving it to you? Your son already said he wasn't giving it to you, but didn't you still snatch it and run off? You don't know how to raise it and raised a spirited little fellow into a listless thing. Now, you refuse to return it to me, your son, no matter what. Truly aggrieved, Jojo didn't want to move at all. She merely raised her eyes and continued to lie there with her head drooped listlessly. Noble consort Duan took more food to feed the little ferret, wanting to tease her. Duan Yu's eyelids kept twitching as he watched from the side, and he quickly went up to block his mother. Mom, don't keep feeding her. Look, she can't even crawl after eating. I'll carry her out to digest the food. Noble consort Duan was about to block her son, but Duan Yu, that guy, reacted quickly and picked up the little Jojo in his arms. Just as she was about to fly away, Xiao Kezi's report came from outside the tent. Your Highness, Noble consort Duan's hand froze in midair as she reached out to snatch the little ferret from her son. Noble consort Duan leisurely combed her hair and gently said, Come in, Xiao Kezi. Xiao Kezi opened the curtain and entered. He hastily bowed to Noble consort Duan and Duan Yu before reporting. Your Highness, His Majesty issued a hunting order just now and wants you to go with him. He said you're going to Stone Slope to hunt a level 7 spirit beast. Duan Yu was disinterested when he heard this. He waved his hand while carrying the little ferret and said, Not going. Xiao Kezi had long known that His Highness was willful and reckless, so he was not the least bit surprised when he heard His Highness's rejection. He just put on a troubled face and said, But His Majesty has already given the order. If your Highness doesn't go, someone with ulterior motives may come to make things difficult for your Highness and say that you openly disobeyed His Majesty's decree. When Noble consort Duan heard this, she frowned and looked at her son. Humph, so what if I disobey? Duan Yu harumphed disapprovingly. Imperial concubine Duan didn't insist on persuading her son to head to the Stone Slope to hunt 7th-grade spirit beasts. Instead, she looked at her son and said, If you don't want to go, then don't go. That place is very dangerous. It's best if you don't go. Sir Jojo flipped over in Duan Yu's arms to make himself more comfortable. She stuck out her ball-sized belly and wished she could use her claws to beat herself. Yesterday, he had eaten 2 pieces of desserts, which made him last the whole night. This ferret's body was simply too weak. She originally wanted it to grow stronger, but she didn't expect the little guy to wilt after eating 2 pieces of pastries. Too vexing, too vexing. Jojo rolled around in Duan Yu's arms again. Duan Yu lowered his head to glance at her. Suddenly, he raised his sharp brows and suggested with a chuckle, How about we bring our little fur ball to the Stone Slope to let some fresh air to aid digestion? The Stone Slope was surrounded by steep and towering ice walls. Inside, there were many strange stones that were naturally formed. It was quite suitable for the little guy to climb the stones, bask in the sun, and stroll around in case he was stuffed to death. Chapter 2377. Noble consort Duan harumphed. I didn't feed him until he was full. Yes. It's all Xiao Tuanzi's fault for being immature and gluttonous. After Duan Yu finished nagging, he greeted his mother and hastily slipped out of the tent with Jojo. Noble consort, Duan angrily glared at her son's back and inwardly scolded him for being petty. This little mink was clever and adorable. She liked it when she saw it. No wonder her son also wanted to snatch it from her. Xiao Tuanzi, master will take you for a stroll. Miss Xiao glanced at him listlessly and couldn't be bothered with him. The moment Duan Yu left the tent, he heard a hearty laugh. Fourth brother. When he turned around, he saw Crown Prince Rong Li walking over with the second and third princes. Behind the three of them was Commandery Princess Xiangchang, whose eyes were clearly red as if she had cried the entire night. When the third prince saw Duan Yu, he couldn't resist saying, "Old Fourth, look at how you angered Xiangchang yesterday. She didn't sleep well the entire night, and even cried until her eyes were swollen." Crown Prince Rong Li couldn't resist chuckling. Fourth brother really shouldn't have done that. Duan Yu pretended not to hear them. After greeting the three of them, he turned to leave with the little mink in his arms. The three people who landed behind him clenched their fists and gnashed their teeth as they looked at his back. Xiangchang looked like she was about to cry again. Facing Rong Li beside her, she weakly called out, "Crown Prince Gidge, is there some misunderstanding between Ali Gidge and me?" Crown Prince Rong Li shuddered for no reason. Don't blame the Crown Prince for being unromantic. It was mainly because Xiangchang Commandery Princess's voice was quite rough. She purposely pinched her throat and spoke like this, so it was even worse than her usual tone. It made one's hair stand on end. "It's nothing, don't think too much." Crown Prince Rong Li smiled awkwardly. "All right, the group is about to move out. Let's hurry and prepare. Let's go." Xiangchang sniffled and nodded. She had the maidservants bring her a date-red spirit stallion and nimbly mounted it. As for Duan Yu, he had already mounted that polar ice wolf and fled with Sir Jojo. He couldn't be bothered to travel with the group. Since the destination is the Stone Slope, then let's meet at the Stone Slope. The great emperor had long known that his fourth son did not follow the routine of ordinary people. Looking at his departing figure, he could only sigh speechlessly. Meanwhile, in South City of Shenzhou, in front of a mansion in a busy alley, the passers-by couldn't help but rub their arms and look back in confusion. Only pedestrians were seen hurriedly passing by. The peddlers on both sides of the street were also selling their wares with all their might. There was nothing out of the ordinary. This street could be considered one of the main streets of South City. Usually, it was quite lively with people coming and going. However, what was strange today was that everyone who walked on this street felt a strange chill. It was as if there were dozens of ice sculptures beside them, faintly emitting cold air. These ordinary people naturally didn't know what was going on. However, the two Taoist priests sitting in the restaurant across the street frowned deeply and looked coldly at the street across from them. A slightly younger Taoist asked, "Senior brother, what's going on? Why are there so many ghosts gathering on such a bustling street?" "This matter is very strange. The sect's elders sent the two of us to investigate first. We must remember not to act rashly and alert the enemy. Senior brother, do we have to wait until nightfall before sneaking into that mansion?" Chapter 2378. The older Taoist priest nodded slightly, yes. The two made up their minds and stopped talking. It was not until night fell that they exchanged a glance and quietly went down from the restaurant. At this time, there were not many people on the street, but the gathering of ghosts was more and more serious. The two glanced at it with their spiritual sense, and their faces were quite dignified. They went to the back of the house and jumped in. As soon as they sneaked to the door of the house, they heard a man's low voice from the main hall. "Since my friend is here, why don't you show yourself?" The two Taoist priests looked at each other. Just as they were about to walk out of the hiding place, they heard a wind in their ears. A tall woman wearing tight night clothes, with a slightly dark complexion, slightly high cheekbones on both sides, slender eyes, and long hair tied up high, landed in the courtyard with a whoosh. She said with a smile, "Sorry to disturb you. My daughter passed by your house at night, and thought it was quite interesting, so I came uninvited." "Quite interesting? Did she want to join in the fun of the ghost carnival?" Zhou Huan led Chi Hua and several people out of the house. Beside the 8 of them stood 3 middle-aged men and an old man. These 4 people were the talisman masters that Prince Mo asked Fong Su to gather around the South City. Among them, the old man, Mr. Mu, was the most profound talisman master. The 3 middle-aged men were yellow and advanced talisman masters respectively. The old man had reached the profound level of great talisman master. But these days, the talisman masters gathered together. No matter how they studied, they couldn't figure out what talisman the little girl was hit by. As for the talisman master that Mo Yin asked Fong Su to find, they naturally couldn't find him in the South City. If you let a group of talisman masters who practice the talisman technique look at the evil talisman on the little girl, they naturally couldn't find anything. "Are you a talisman master?" Zohuan looked up and down at the woman. The woman was only 28 or 29 years old, but her cheekbones were slightly high, making her face look a bit harsh and serious. The woman grinned, and her personality seemed to be quite straightforward. "That's right. I didn't expect to see so many peers in an ordinary small house. Nice to meet you." The old man, Mr. Mu, stroked his beard and said with a smile, "Miss, you must be a yellow-grade talisman master. Old Mister has good eyesight." The woman cupped her hands. "I am Shun Fei." Old Master Mu nodded and shifted his gaze to the other side. "Are those 2 friends still not going to show themselves?" The 2 Taoist priests looked at each other and jumped out from their hiding places. They cupped their hands and greeted everyone. Old Master Mu smiled and said, "So, it's the 2 Taoists from the Tai Chi sect. Nice to meet you." The great name of the Tai Chi sect naturally resounded throughout the Divine Continent. This was the Tai Chi sect, one of the 7 great sects. The sect mainly cultivated talisman techniques, and the old sect masters' talisman techniques were not much worse than the head of a talisman aristocratic family. The 2 Taoist priests looked at each other and bowed to the old man at the same time. Old Mr. Mu. So they knew each other. Old Mr. Mu's talisman technique was the highest amongst this group of people, and he was a rather upright person. He had a brilliant reputation in the talisman puppet world, so everyone naturally followed him into the central room. The 2 Taoist priests and the woman, Shun Fei, looked towards the backyard at the same time. When they saw a large defensive formation set up there, their hearts couldn't help but tremble slightly. The woman, Shun Fei, was the first to ask, "Old Mister, may I know what happened in the backyard of this mansion? Why are there so many ghosts gathered at the front door?" Chapter 2379. Old Sir Mu involuntarily heaved a long sigh. This is a long story. Please follow me, everyone. Since they were all talisman masters, the more people there were, the better. Old Sir Mu also hoped that these people would be able to discern something, especially the 2 disciples from the Taiji sect. He hoped that they would be able to give a different opinion. The people who followed Old Sir Mu into the backyard passed through the defensive array and arrived at the door of a row of rooms. Tong Zheng was standing guard outside the room. When he saw the people who came, he merely glanced at them indifferently. Old Sir Mu cupped his hands and said, "Please inform them." Tong Mo silently flashed into the room. However, he flashed out a moment later and said indifferently to Old Sir Mu, "Everyone come in." The room was extremely large. When they walked in, they saw a row of low cabinets carved with flowers. At the corner, there were several double-sided bamboo screens embroidered with green bamboo. Shun Fei focused his gaze and saw a large bed made of rosewood. Indistinctly, he could make out 2 figures, one sitting and one lying down. During this period of time, Mo Yin had been feeding the little fellow spirit fluid every day and had the maids help her change her clothes regularly. Therefore, even though she had been lying down for 7 days with her eyes closed, she still looked clean, comfortable, and tidy. Her small face was rosy and glossy. She looked no different from a normal person who was sleeping. Only Mo Yin was extremely anxious. He was aware that the little fellow had been lying down for 7 days. During these 7 days, other than hearing her faint breathing and feeling her strong heartbeat, she didn't move, jump, or smile. To be frank, he couldn't even see her stoic face that he usually saw every day. Other than a peaceful, sleeping expression on the little fellow's face, there was nothing else. He didn't know what had happened to her, what was wrong with her soul, and why he couldn't even contact the sapling. As the days passed, he grew increasingly flustered and fearful. No matter how he comforted himself, he couldn't convince himself that Jojo was fine. Lifting the curtain, Imo Yin walked out with a gloomy expression and nodded at old Sir Mu, who cupped his hands in greeting. "Greetings, Your Highness." Old Master Mu's words shocked the two Taoist priests and Shun Fei. They thought to themselves, so this magnificent and outstanding man standing in front of me is actually the crown prince who hasn't returned to the divine prefecture for a long time? Your Highness, these two are disciples of the Tai Chi sect. This young friend Shun is also a talisman master who is attracted by the ghost spirits outside. Let these three take a look at the crown princess's condition. What does Your Highness think? So the one lying inside was the crown princess, Shun Fei thought. After receiving the crown prince's approval, old Master Mu led the three of them behind the screen and looked at the young girl lying on the bed with a calm expression. The young girl was covered with a golden velvet quilt. Although her eyes were closed, her face still looked very delicate and beautiful. Shinjin could guarantee that she had never seen anyone more beautiful than the one in front of her, at least in the Great Divine Land. Old Master Mu sighed and explained the crown princess's condition to the three of them. The two Tai Chi sect disciples first threw 2 awakening talismans and then used several different talismans. Then, they frowned and said, "How could this be? Could it be that the ghost spirits gathered outside because they took a fancy to the crown princess's body?" Chapter 2380. Shin Fei suddenly thought of this and could not help but ask in shock. Old Mr. Moon nodded with a grave expression. The two Taoist priests of the Tai Chi sect naturally had ugly expressions. Shun Fei sneered and said, "Since we have encountered such a situation, we naturally cannot stand by and do nothing. This one does not have any other abilities, but it is still possible to assist old Mr. in setting up a few defensive glyph arrays." She, Shun Fei, absolutely would not allow those ghosts to freely occupy other people's bodies. Old Mr. Moon nodded with gratification. "Then I will have to trouble everyone to help. It's our duty." The few glyph masters discussed for a while and decided to go out later to reinforce the formation of the courtyard. As for Mo Lien, she called over a submissive maid. After instructing her in a deep voice, she left the maid by the little fellow's side to watch over it. She raised her hand to rub the space between her eyebrows and walked out with a heavy heart. The slightly cold wind blew against his face, causing his head to clear up a little. Now, he naturally had to keep a clear head at all times and think of countermeasures. This little fellow's body was completely fine, which meant that there was a problem with the soul. As for why the soul had left the body, Emolian naturally did not have any clue at this moment. The courtyard under the winter sun looked rather bleak and desolate. In the small garden, the flowers had long withered, leaving only a few withered leaves that swirled on the ground with the cold wind. Emolian walked under a faint ray of sunlight. Her thoughts had long drifted to an unknown place, but a few sharp voices sounded in her ears. "There is still no movement today?" A woman's scornful and sharp laughter sounded. "That's right. He hasn't woken up for 7 days. I think there is an 80% chance that he is about to die." Another voice was slightly lower, but the tone was full of disdain. Prince Mo's footsteps paused, a violent rage suddenly surging in his heart. What nonsense were these women gossiping about? Who were they saying is about to die? He narrowed his cold eyes and looked through a few withered trees. He saw 3 gorgeously dressed young women sitting in a pavilion, drinking tea and lazing around. Mo Yin naturally recognized the 3 of them. Fong Su had sent 4 maids to serve Jojo, along with the maid who was left to serve Jojo. In the past few days, they had been very respectful in front of him, not even daring to look at him. But he didn't expect them to be so unruly behind his back, daring to curse his master. The Crown Prince is really pitiful. Accompanying a living dead person day and night is truly torturous. I think so too. We could have set off for Dragon Flame City a long time ago, but because of that living dead, our journey was delayed for so long. I don't know what's so good about that woman. I heard that she's just an ordinary village girl from a planet called Seacone in the lower star field. In Dragon Flame City, any daughter of an aristocratic family would be much better than her. That's right. I don't know what His Highness is thinking, insisting on bringing a living dead person from the lower star field back to our divine prefecture. It's so annoying to take care of that half-dead woman every day. Fortunately, I can come out to get some fresh air, or else it will be even more uncomfortable. They were brought here from the palace by Fong Su, specially waiting for His Highness in South City and waiting for him to return to the palace. Now, the four of them, who had high status in the palace, were asked to serve that half-dead and submissive village girl. Dissatisfaction and resentment accumulated in their hearts day by day. Chapter 2381. In addition, His Highness, who was as handsome as a god, didn't even look at them. Every day, he just stayed by the living dead's side, watching over her day and night. How could they not be angry? That kind of person from the lower star area might only be at the low level of the profound realm. I really don't know how she has the face to stay by His Highness' side. Exactly. Oh, it's so annoying. If she always looks half dead, I don't know how long we'll have to wait on her. What can we do? Who asked us to be in such a bad situation? I'm really not reconciled. I think she's 99% rich and poor. She'll be fine with just a few injections. Uffed. One of them laughed. 2 injections? Do you dare? His Highness has been watching over that living dead almost all the time. Even when we bathed and changed the living dead, he looked at us through the screen as if we would abuse her. If you dared to secretly give her injections, would you still be standing here and laughing with us? The person who said the injections also found it funny. She giggled a few times. Do you think I dare? His Highness, could it be that he could look at her 24 hours a day without blinking? He has to eat and wash his hands. Humph. Don't say that. Maybe she'll suddenly wake up after I give her 2 injections. If that's the case, I'll be a hero. Hey, hey, hey. Hey, hey, hey. Wow. Then when you become a hero, remember to help us. I really don't know why His Highness is so patient. A palace maid said enviously. Other than her pretty face, what else can that girl have that can compare to the noble ladies of Dragon Flame City? She's already a living dead, but she's still so seductive. The palace maid curled her lips. Even if she's a fairy, His Highness will get tired of her one day. In their opinion, the crown prince of the divine land was incomparably noble. How could he stay by a half-dead person's side? Sigh, so annoying. If that woman had died early, perhaps we would have been able to return to the palace sooner. The palace maid who had spoken stomped her feet and twisted her body as she turned around, her voice suddenly lowering. Separated by the withered branches, she widened her eyes in horror. She was as silent as a cicada in winter as she looked at the crown prince, whose expression was cold and whose gaze was so deep that one could not see the end of it. She did not know how long the crown prince had been standing behind them. The palace maid felt a buzzing sound in her head. She was scared out of her wits and was on the verge of collapsing. Her 2 companions beside her tugged at her sleeves in surprise. What's wrong with you? She followed her and turned around. Her mouth gaped open and her eyes almost fell out of their sockets. Emo Yin's eyes were filled with coldness as she asked word by word, "Who did you say is a living dead?" Bang! The bedroom door was kicked open by someone. The palace maid in the room was originally sitting by the bed and dozing off out of boredom. From time to time, she glanced at the girl lying motionless on the bed and rolled her eyes impatiently. The sound of the door being kicked was so loud that it scared her out of her wits and made her jump up from the bed. The crown prince appeared at the door with a vicious aura. The palace maid opened her mouth wide and hurriedly bowed. "You are your highness?" Chapter 2382. Like a whirlwind, Emo Yin dashed forward and sent that royal maid sprawled on the ground, flying with a kick. He hurriedly reached out to pick up the little fellow and pulled open her collar to check her neck, shoulders, and legs. Then, he lifted up her sleeves. When his line of sight landed on her jade-like arm and saw the 2 finger marks on it, his entire handsome face turned green with anger. It was obvious that these palace maids did not take good care of his JoJo. The humble and cautious performance in front of him was all an act. Behind his back, how did they choke his JoJo to this extent? This was because he almost never left JoJo's side, so there was no chance for them to do anything. That was why there were only 2 bruises left. If they were allowed to take care of his JoJo, as usual, who knows how the little girl would be tortured by these wretches. And Mo Lian's heart was filled with a violent rage, almost unable to control himself, and wanted to go berserk. What damned calmness, elegance, all get lost. These 7 days, he had been feeling suffocated every day, and now he found out about this matter. He could not control his anger, could not control his desire to kill, to destroy the world, to make them all die without a burial place. The 4 palace maids trembled as they knelt on the ground, unable to stop their bodies from trembling, as if they were sifting chaff, and repeatedly kowtowed to beg for mercy. When Fong Su hurriedly walked into the courtyard with Eunuch Hu, he saw the 4 palace maids pressed down on the long bench. Their bodies were already badly mutilated, and their breaths were also on the verge of death. "Your Highness!" Fong Su and the others hurriedly kneeled on one knee and cupped their hands in salute. Their eyes were filled with surprise as they looked at the black figure standing on the steps. They saw him looking coldly ahead, his phoenix eyes filled with endless anger. His entire person was emitting an icy cold air, incomparably awe-inspiring. Fong Su's heart could not help but thump slightly. Here you talk about the living dead. Right, you talk about the living dead. Today, this prince will make all of you living dead. The crown prince's tone was not high, but the coldness in his voice had already made everyone present feel a chill down their spines. "Your Highness, please calm down." In the entire courtyard, from top to bottom, there was not a single servant who was not afraid. The steward sat paralyzed on the side, looking like he was about to faint. Since this prince temporarily moved into this residence, he was basically like a little transparent. He did not speak much and did not make any requests of the princess. Although she had a cold look on her face every day, she seemed to have a very kind temper. Today, the steward knew what it meant when the crown prince was angry, and what it meant when he said that just a cold glare could suppress your heart to breathe. Although the 4 palace maids, they were to be in the courtyard as a steward, naturally he did not have to take care of these servants. Eunuch Who could not hide the astonishment in his eyes. He hurriedly took 2 steps forward, lowered his head, and said softly, "Your Highness, please calm down. I do not know how these 4 palace maids." Prince Amo turned his head, and his cold gaze fell on the old eunuch. He naturally knew about the capable eunuch by his imperial father's side, but now he had no interest in giving him a good look. Eunuch Whose heart slightly tightened, and he subconsciously lowered his head, thinking to himself, "This crown prince's eyes are abnormally cold." Chapter 2383. When he looked at you coldly, the psychological pressure he gave you was not at all inferior to His Majesty's. Eunuch Who said even more respectfully, "I wonder why your Highness is angry. This old servant will." "No need." Emolian looked at him coldly. "Throw them far away. We have no interest in seeing them again." Tong led a few black-clothed youths and silently appeared behind the crown prince. He flew forward, picked up the 4 badly mutilated palace maids, and jumped over the wall to leave. Eunuch Who, his willful grandfather, what was he trying to do? The crown prince's cold gaze flitted across Eunuch Who's face. Then he flicked his sleeves and left without a word. He left behind a group of people kneeling or paralyzed on the ground. They looked at each other, but no one dared to stand up on their own initiative. Emolian clenched his fists and quickly walked into the room. He closed the door behind him. His phoenix eyes, which were filled with coldness and killing intent, softened little by little when he saw the little girl lying quietly on the bed. He ran forward quickly. Emolian pulled back his arms and hugged the little fellow tightly in his arms. He hugged her tightly, hugged her tightly, hugged her tightly. He was such a proud baby. Now he was unknowingly being despised, loathed, and tormented by a few lowly wretches. His heart ached. His heart ached so much that he wanted to die. It was all his fault. He was not attentive enough. He did not work hard enough. He did not give enough. He was not good enough. That was why she suddenly disappeared. He was getting more and more panicked and fearful. Especially when he closed his eyes, he would strangely think of her staring blankly into the distance and saying to him, "I once had a very distant dream." In the dream, "No way, no way, impossible, impossible, impossible. That was just a dream." She wouldn't go back. She wouldn't go back to that dream. She would not abandon him and go back to the dream. Absolutely not. He held her hands tightly and rested his head on her shoulders. He did not realize that he was trembling slightly. He hugged her as if he was hugging her at this moment, and it was as if he would hug her forever. His eyes were broken and blurred. "Where are you? Where did you go?" The furry little white mink jumped lightly and landed on someone's chest. It turned its head and looked at the silent wind with a slightly confused expression. The stone slope was surrounded by odd-shaped stones. But there wasn't even a third-grade spirit beast here, let alone a seventh-grade spirit beast. Except for this small marten. Duanyu, this guy, simply found a spot to slump down on the rock slope to drink and sleep, leaving her to wander around this place. At this moment, the sky was about to darken. It seemed that he had no intention of leaving at all. Little Martin looked up at the sky and used its little paw to step on someone's chest. However, a certain someone pressed down on her round little body with one hand. "Stop fooling around. Sleep some more." Duanyu reached out to block the glaring afterglow of the setting sun. The little white mink squirmed out from under his arm and scratched his arm with its paw. Duanyu withdrew his arm and opened his eyes. Under the rays of the setting sun, his pair of outstanding peach blossom eyes seemed to contain an inextinguishable starlight that floated and sank in the depths of his eyes. "If you scratch again, I'll chop off your little paw," he threatened and raised his fist. Chapter 2385. "Mom, don't feed her until she's full again," Duanyu exasperatedly called out as he watched his mother carry the little thing away. Really, his mother. Why did she always have to snatch the little fellow from him? The elderly nanny next to noble consort Duan covered her mouth and snickered. "Your Highness, did you see His Highness's gaze just now? So resentful." Noble consort Duan also nodded with a smile. I saw it. This child, it's not like Mom stole his wife. So petty." Noble consort Duan grumbled as she carried the little mink back to her seat. She happily fed the little fellow food. "Your Highness, this is the blue and white wine bestowed by His Majesty." A maidservant walked up to noble consort Duan with a smile and bowed slightly before pouring a cup of wine for noble consort Duan. As the wine flowed, noble consort Duan sniffed slightly and said joyfully, "This wine's fragrance is truly intoxicating. I know it's good wine even before tasting it." "That's right. This is the tribute wine sent by the Kingdom of Qingzhou. There are only a dozen jars every year, so not everyone can drink it," that maidservant explained with a chuckle. The instant the wine was poured, Miss Qiao's small nose also twitched. At this time, noble consort Duan grinned as she flicked her sleeve and reached out to pick up the wine cup, about to put it into her mouth. Without another word, the little fellow pounced forward and kicked the cup of wine out of noble consort Duan's hand in one smooth motion. Clang! The cup shattered on the ground, but the sound wasn't enough to attract everyone's attention. However, everyone was originally looking at noble consort Duan, who was being bestowed wine by His Majesty, but when they saw this scene, they were instantly petrified on the spot. Noble consort Duan's empty hand also stiffened. That hand was still holding the cup, but the cup shattered on the ground. Puffed! An undisguised malicious laughter wantonly rose in the venue. Halfway through their laughter, a tall and voluptuous woman hurriedly stood up and bowed to the emperor and empress with a smile on her face. "My apologies, your majesty, your majesty, your majesty, your majesty." This concubine was rude, but it was truly too funny just now. Noble Consort Duan's mink is really interesting. Noble Consort Duan stood up with an indifferent expression and also bowed to the emperor-empress who was seated at the head of the table. This concubine's ferret is still young and doesn't know etiquette. I will teach it well in the future. Everyone's expression twisted. On the other hand, the imperial concubine who had jumped up to ridicule Noble Consort Duan was frozen on the spot with a stiff expression. She was so angry that the veins on her forehead were twitching. What did Noble Consort Duan mean by this? She had just said that she was lacking in manners, and now Noble Consort Duan was saying that her little Martin was also lacking in manners. Wasn't this implying that she was the same as that little bastard, unable to see the bigger picture? The Empress said faintly, "Noble Consort Duan, it's not that Aijiao wants to criticize you. There are only 12 jars of blue and white wine offered by the Qingzhou Kingdom. One of them was knocked over by your mink. What a disappointment. Your Majesty is right." That gorgeous woman from before couldn't resist interjecting. Noble Consort Duan's mink knocked over the tribute wine His Majesty bestowed, so she naturally can only use her life as compensation. The Empress remained silent. Just as the Emperor of Cangzhou was about to speak with a frown, he heard Duan Yu coldly say, "You're all blind, right? Look at what that is." Following the direction he pointed in, everyone turned to look in that direction. Chapter 2386. The Cangzhou campsite was originally built on a piece of land in the heavenly ice snow region. They had come here to hunt many times, so they naturally knew where to set up camp and where to hunt for more prey. At this time, everyone was looking in the direction Duan Yu was pointing. They saw that the toppled wine stained the ground, and the soil had been completely charred black. This caused the Celestial Empress and Empress's expressions to change drastically. The enchanting beauty who spoke earlier also immediately shut up, not knowing what to say. It turned out that this was a ferret that could distinguish poison. The reason why the ferret wanted to topple the wine cup in Noble Consort Duan's hand was because the ferret knew there was poison in the cup. Duan Yu's eyes flashed, and he stood up indifferently. He walked up to support his mother, who had a slightly unsightly expression, and bent down to pick up the little white ferret that was squatting on the side. His fingers gently stroked the little white ferret's head as he looked at everyone with a sneer. Under the bonfire, the man with outstanding features had an icy expression as he stood there like an ice sculpture. Although he was good-looking, he was brimming with a cold, baleful aura. You probably don't know. This prince's ferret can not only distinguish poison, but can also ferret out the person who poisoned it. As Duan Yu stroked this little white ferret, his eerie gaze shifted slightly, sweeping past everyone's expressions. Everyone was taken aback by his words. Then, they began to look at each other, their eyes filled with doubt. Miss Qiao couldn't resist secretly rolling her eyes when she heard this. She thought to herself, this guy is really confident. If she was a normal ferret, would she freaking cooperate with his actions? Go, little furball. Ferret out the person who poisoned you. Miss Qiao had just finished rolling her eyes when she felt her petite body lighten slightly. She had been tossed out by that unruly dunce. She angrily howled and pounced on the face of the plump beauty who had mocked Noble Consort Duan earlier. Her small claws scratched her face twice without hesitation, startling that beauty into shrieking repeatedly. She reached out to grab the little white ferret's chubby body. The little fellow swiftly jumped onto her shoulder and pounced behind her neck, scratching it again. That beauty shrieked in pain as she flipped over the table in a sorry state and landed heavily on the ground. Nonsense! What nonsense! The Empress slapped the armrest heavily and scolded angrily. Stop it now. Duan Yu leisurely strolled to the front of the well-rounded beauty. He first carried the little fellow on her back into his arms and smoothed its fur. Afterwards, he coldly glanced at her and pointed at the dumbstruck Songzhou guards beside them. "What are you spacing out for? What are you waiting for? Hurry up and restrain the perpetrator." That plump beauty screamed and covered her face, crying as she knelt on the ground. She crawled forward on her knees and kowtowed to the celestial emperor and empress for help. "Save me, your majesty, empress. Is Prince Chun out of his mind? Beauty Wong, why don't you take a look at what dropped by your feet?" Duan Yu reminded coldly. The plump beauty looked down and her body stiffened. Impossible. How could she have the medicine on her? Didn't she throw it away already? She abruptly raised her head and looked towards the high ground. Sitting there was a dignified and decent Songzhou empress. Under the night sky, her eyes were both bright and dark. "Royal father, how should Beauty Wong be punished for poisoning noble consort Duan?" Duan Yu looked indifferently at the Songzhou emperor, who was sitting upright and still. Chapter 2387. Guards! The Emperor of Songzhou waved his hand and ordered, "Pass on Jun's decree. Beauty Wong is innately jealous and immoral. Improper words and deeds. A breach of etiquette in front of the Emperor. She was audacious enough to use underhanded means to harm noble consort Duan and stole her title of beauty. She will be severely punished with 50 strokes of the cane. She will be demoted to a commoner and expelled from the palace." Beauty Wong instantly collapsed to the ground. Even as she was being dragged and flogged, she was still shrieking incessantly, "Your Majesty, this concubine is innocent. Your Majesty, this concubine is truly innocent." It was a good banquet, but in the end, it ended on a sour note. After the Celestial Empress left the scene, everyone also dispersed. Duan Yu used the excuse that his mother needed to rest properly and didn't allow the little ferret to disturb her. Hence, he carried the protesting Miss Qiao into his tent. "Fourth brother." A chuckle came from behind. Duan Yu turned around and saw the second and third princes walking over while holding hands. They were looking at him with fake smiles. "Is there something else, elder brothers?" Duan Yu asked aloofly. "It's getting late, and you've been tired the entire day. Elder brothers should return early to rest." "No hurry." The second prince's face twitched as he scanned his younger brother from head to toe. His gaze landed on the little white ferret in his arms. Fourth brother's ferret really stole the limelight today. "Oh, it's merely some insignificant tricks." Duan Yu raised his hand to stroke the little fellow's head. He could feel that little thing awkwardly shaking its head, refusing to let him stroke it. "Ha!" The third prince pursed his lips and said with a chuckle, "After the commotion tonight, we didn't have time to open everyone's eyes and see the level 7 spirit beast we captured." "Oh." Duan Yu looked disinterested and added, "Sacred beasts can be seen frequently, but I really don't have much interest in seeing level 7 spirit beasts." When the little fellow heard this, it couldn't resist rolling around on his arm. It felt that this guy was truly vicious. His mouth was simply comparable to Lien's. Even though the second and third princes were so angry that they looked like pufferfish, they still had to maintain a graceful smile on their faces. Even Jojo felt sorry for them. "Moreover, I've heard that the person who contributed the most to the capture of the 7th grade spirit beast was still Prince Rong." Duan Yu threw another fatal flying dagger and said with a chuckle, "Presumably, if vassal Prince Rong hadn't appeared in time, my 2 elder brothers might have been in danger." This time, the third prince could no longer maintain his good grace. He pointed at Duan Yu and shouted furiously, "You! What do you mean? You! Are you saying that without Rong Qing, we brothers wouldn't have been able to defeat that 7th grade spirit beast?" Duan Yu shrugged with a of course expression, which angered the gloomy second prince so much that he was also rendered speechless. Duan Yu looked up and waved at the other side with a chuckle. Rong, a tall man with outstanding features, walked over from behind the 2 princes. He cupped his hands and bowed slightly. "Greetings to your second highness, third highness, and his highness Prince Chun." The second prince flicked his sleeve gloomily and said, "Let's go." The third prince naturally followed behind the second prince. He turned back to glare fiercely at Duan Yu before leaving in a huff. The third prince originally wanted to show off and taunt Duan Yu while he was at it, but he didn't expect to be humiliated by Duan Yu. It angered him so much that he returned to his tent with a swollen belly. Chapter 2388. Rongqing curiously looked at the little ferret in Duan Yu's arms. Can this ferret really smell and identify poisons? Duan Yu nodded. Of course. Rongqing then raised her hand to pat the little ferret's head. I can touch it. Ow. The little fellow turned around and roared at him. Touch my ass. Do you think this lady is a kitten? Rongqing's expression turned a bit sluggish. That this was a ferret? Are you sure it wasn't a wolf cub? Duan Yu snickered and forcefully rubbed the little fellow's head. Miss Qiao was so angry that she scratched the back of his hand with her claws. Hiss! Duan Yu retracted his hand and looked at the 2 extra marks on the back of his hand. He huffed. You're really ruthless, always scratching me. I'll chop off your claws one day. Vassal Air Rong will be returning first. Duan Yu waved at him and turned to walk back to his tent with the little fellow in his arms. Rongqing stood there and watched Duan Yu's departing figure, curiosity involuntarily growing in her eyes. This is Highness the 4th prince that the emperor brought back from the lower star domain seemed to be a very demonic person. There must be another master behind Beauty Wong, but she probably didn't expect that she would lose her life in today's confrontation. Demoted to a commoner, Rongqing curled her lips. She would lose half her life after being flogged 50 times. How could she survive being thrown out of the palace, penniless like this? After returning to the large tent, Duan Yu placed the little ferret on a soft cushion and prepared to bathe before coming back to sleep. Thankfully, his bathing room was set up in the large tent next door, which prevented the tent he was staying in from steaming with water vapor. This also made Miss Qiao feel less awkward. This place was incomparably cold, so the water vapor inside the tent couldn't evaporate. Sleeping in the middle of the night would definitely freeze someone into a popsicle. When Duan Yu returned to the tent, the sky outside had already turned completely dark. At a glance, he saw a certain small animal sprawled on his bed. It looked like it was already asleep. His eyes flickered, and he couldn't help but find it amusing. Duan Yu walked up and picked up the little fellow. He stuffed her into the blankets and stroked her little head. Now that she was asleep, she naturally lay there obediently, allowing him to stroke her head. If she was awake, she would probably scratch him again. When Miss Qiao woke up, she saw that the light in the tent was still on. That idiot was sitting on the cushion with his back facing her. It seemed like he was going to meditate for the night. The little fellow quietly moved his small body. Just as he was about to crawl over, he saw his body move slightly. She quickly lay down and continued to pretend to be asleep. After Duan Yu finished regulating his breathing for 12 cycles, he felt that his spirit was fine. So he stood up and walked to the table to pour himself a cup of water to drink. Miss Qiao guessed that he was probably going to sleep, so she lay there motionless. However, that idiot didn't say anything for a long time. The little guy couldn't help but secretly open his eyes, and from the corner of his eyes, he glanced at the man sitting at the table. What is that guy doing? Cursing silently, Miss Qiao got up stealthily, jumped down from the soft brocade, and crawled a few paces over to his feet. However, she saw that he was supporting his forehead with one hand, and his eyes were in a daze. It turned out that he was sitting here in a daze in the middle of the night. Miss Qiao couldn't help but find it funny. Her pair of small black eyes glanced over, and then she couldn't help but be stunned. She saw a painting spread out on the table. Beside the clear water, there was a gentle mist, the vast sky, and the color of the water reached the sky. Chapter 2389. In the painting, a little girl with a stoic face was standing under a peach blossom tree, her eyes coldly gazing ahead. The little fellow turned to look at the man in bewilderment. Wasn't this Sir Jojo? Duan Yu, this guy, wasn't sleeping in the middle of the night and was sitting here looking at Sir Jojo's painting? What a dunce. Duan Yu had long discovered that this little fellow had sneaked to his side. He lifted her up and casually kicked her a few times before placing her on the table. Jojo curiously reached out her paw and lightly touched that painting. Duan swatted away her paw and picked up the painting to look at it for a while before telling her, "This little girl is really fierce." What? Sir Jojo's ears perked up as he solemnly squatted on the table and stared at Duan, that dunce. This guy actually dared to speak ill of Jojo behind his back. Let's hear what else he has to say. Don't be fooled by her stoic face and expressionless appearance. When she gets angry, she can make the sky fall and the earth crack. Arbor, that this definitely wasn't Jojo? How could Jojo be like this? She was a good girl and very gentle. She never flipped out easily. Although she's fierce, she really is adorable and adorable. Duan lamented, "Don't be fooled by her usually stoic face. In reality, 99% of it is an act. You're the one who's acting. There's an abundance of emotions beneath that stoic face of hers." Sir Jojo spat at him. "You're simply spouting nonsense. I don't want to listen to your nonsense anymore. I still remember the first time we met. She treated me like I was the enemy who killed her father and abused me." Duan was completely immersed in his own world and spoke through gritted teeth. "She forced my head to drink that filthy water. She even tied me up like a dumpling and hit my head with a piece of wood every day." The little ferret was expressionless. "You asked for it." At that time, I was thinking, how could there be such a fierce girl in this world? She was so fierce that I didn't want to have any interactions with her in the future. But I didn't expect. But now, I wish I could see her every day. I miss her and think about her. When I close my eyes, she walks around in my dreams. I wanted to grab her, but I didn't dare to. My heart was in a mess. Sigh, I don't know what you're trying to say." "Young man, this is the sign of a demonic barrier." Little Martin looked at him with a heavy expression. Its pair of little black beady eyes were filled with solemn and serious emotions. "What do you think I should do?" Duan reached out to pick up this little mink and said while gazing at her, I probably fell in love with her. Otherwise, why do you think I think of her all the time and think of her all the time?" Miss Jo felt her brain heat up, and her whole person, oh no, her whole ferret, stared at him rather stupidly. Was she being confessed to as a mink? Oh wait, how could Duan possibly know that she was hiding inside this ferret's body? Don't panic, he doesn't know. However, why did he feel inexplicably flustered? If he said that to her, she wouldn't know how to face this dunce in the future. What should she do? Why did she suddenly feel a bit awkward? The little fellow shrunk her small body and retreated a few steps. However, her body was suddenly picked up by him. A pair of black beady eyes stared straight at his almost sparkling peach blossom eyes. Chapter 2390. She inexplicably wanted to cover her eyes with her tiny paws. Her ears twitched, and she suddenly heard the dimwit's faint sigh. "Jojo, is that you?" Sir Jojo's entire body, oh no, her entire mink body stiffened. She felt like she was most likely going to be exposed while squatting in his hands. So she kept scheming in her mind. She couldn't admit it. Ow, ow, ow. She couldn't admit it. How could Sir Jojo be forced to stay inside a little mink's body so miserably? That was impossible. Sir Jojo, who was willing to suffer because of his pride, expressionlessly looked at Duan. As long as Sir Jojo didn't admit it, no one would know what happened when Sir Jojo was tricked by the soul detachment talisman. Sir Jojo wouldn't tell anyone about such a deplorable and ugly thing. Ow, ow. Uffed. Duan couldn't resist chuckling. He rubbed Jojo's head and said, "Your serious expression is so funny. I'm just teasing you. You're so ugly. So how could you be my Jojo?" Duan said with a grin, "My Jojo is fair, tender, and beautiful. You're the prettiest little stoic in the world." "Bah, you're the ugly one." Miss Chow turned her head and faced him with the back of her head. She felt a little irritated and wanted to jump out of his embrace. All right, rest." He pressed down on her chubby body and put the painting scroll into his inner world before carrying her to the bed. Miss Chow suddenly felt irritated, especially after hearing his confession just now. She just wanted to run away like an ostrich and didn't feel sleepy at all. Little furball, sleep. Duan Yu withdrew his hand and looked at her with flickering eyes. "Why are you scratching me again?" The little white mink jumped away and climbed onto the soft mattress next to the bed, looking like she was going to sleep here tonight. Duan Yu sat by the bed and looked at her like this. His eyes were so deep that she couldn't discern his true emotions. Miss Chiao's heart skipped a beat, and she felt like she had nowhere to hide. Could it be that Duan Yu really recognized her? This was impossible. Her performance was so perfect that no matter what, it would be difficult for him to associate this mink with Sir Jojo, right? She once again lowered her head to size herself up. Her perfect disguise had no flaws at all. Duan Yu couldn't possibly recognize her. Duan Yu suddenly stood up and walked towards her step by step. Arbor saw his strange expression and had an inexplicable feeling of wanting to flee. She felt that if she continued to stay here, things would go out of control. She didn't want to hurt Duan Yu, this dunce, at all. Her body felt light as he picked her up with both hands. In the next second, he placed her under the warm blanket. "Go to sleep." He threw down these words and walked out of the tent without looking back. The cold wind was howling outside. Where was he going in the middle of the night? Arbor couldn't help but roar in his heart. A pair of small black eyes stared at his figure disappearing at the entrance of the tent. Her heart was filled with displeasure. How could this loathsome guy be so willful? She sprawled on the bed and tossed and turned, wondering if she had exposed herself in front of him. Did he recognize her? How should she face this dunce in the future that his words made her feel very conflicted? Couldn't they just be good? Like in the past. Chapter 2391. She thought she would be so frustrated and upset that she wouldn't be able to sleep, but who knew it didn't take long for her to fall asleep, and she slept very soundly. Not as expected, she was a big-hearted child. Lying there, her round little body didn't move at all. Her soul naturally strolled out and continued to hover above the bed, starting the cycle of cultivation. What Arbor didn't know was, at this time, a figure was silently standing outside the window, staring at her soul that was gradually becoming clearer. His fists clenched and relaxed and tightened again. In the end, Duan Yu still managed to restrain his impulse to charge inside. Not to speculate, not to probe, but to witness with his own eyes. His Jojo was really by his side at this very moment. It was her, it really was her, it was her. Duan Yu felt like he almost couldn't control his frantic heartbeat, nor could he suppress the longing that had been hidden in his heart. What to do? What should he do? Should I use this chance to make you stay? Make you stay on an entire day and night? Inside the residence's small courtyard, Fong Su, Eunuch Hu, and the servants were all frantic with anxiety, unable to conceal the anxiety in their eyes. His Highness the Crown Prince had locked himself and the Crown Princess inside that room, but there had been no commotion the entire time. Fong Su and the others were naturally extremely anxious, until Elder Mu hurried over and told them that the defensive talisman matrix outside was about to collapse and that more and more ghost spirits were gathering outside the residence. Fong Su finally couldn't resist jumping up and quickly walked to the door of the wing room. He hastily lifted his robe and knelt down, saying gravely, "This general, Fong Su, requests an audience with His Highness the Crown Prince for an urgent matter." This general, Fong Su. Shun Fei jumped into the courtyard with a whoosh and looked at the servants kneeling all over the floor. He anxiously said, "Why are you all still here? Everyone enter the room." At this time, Shun Fei's shoulder was also injured, and he was exhausted from head to toe after several consecutive battles. The defensive talisman matrix outside was about to collapse from so many ghost spirits, and those things would soon charge into the residence. The steward trembled as he crawled to the door of the wing room and cried, "Your Highness the Crown Prince, why don't you leave with Commander Fong first? If something were to happen to His Highness, not only would his old bones be ground to dust, the entire South City would probably be buried with His Highness." Your Highness! Your Highness! Get out of the way!" Shun Fei angrily roared at Fong Su, Eunuch Hu, and the steward who were kneeling at the door. He rushed forward and kicked the door of the room with all his might. Everyone was dumbstruck as they watched the two pieces of door fall to the ground with a loud crash. Shunfei rushed into the room and pushed aside the obstructing screen in front of her. She looked straight at the man who was sitting by the bed and hugging the crown princess motionlessly with his head bowed. She didn't know how long the man had been frozen in this position. "Your Highness," they were about to charge in from outside. "Aren't you leaving yet?" At this moment, chaotic shouts could be heard coming from the courtyard. The flying rune papers quickly enveloped the servants in the courtyard and formed a defense rune array. The target of those ghost spirits who were rushing in wasn't the servants, so they naturally couldn't be bothered to attack the rune array. "Protect Eldest Miss." The moment Zhou Huan and the others rushed in, they quickly stood at the door of the wing room and started fighting with the ghost spirits who were flying over. But there were at least 2,000 ghost spirits gathered here. Chapter 2392. Zhou Huan's group of 8 could fend off 35 ghosts, or even 100 or 200 ghosts. How could they fend off 2,000 ghosts? The talisman paper around them had already been used up. Everyone picked up their swords and fought against the ghost spirits. Emollien's arm, which was hugging Arbor, slightly tightened. Finally, she reacted and slowly turned her head to the side. What entered everyone's eyes was a pair of pitch-black phoenix-like eyes. They were deep and cold as they stared at the group of ghost spirits that were swarming in with a shout. Shunfei didn't know what kind of scene was imprinted in this crown prince's eyes. It was just that when she looked at these messy, weird-looking ghost spirits, she was already about to vomit from disgust. That person's eyes contained a deep chill. Just like this, he indifferently stared at the door, staring at these crooked ghost spirits. It was as if what he saw was nothing more than a wisp of spring wind blowing on his face, a wisp of flowing light brushing past. His handsome face was completely unmoved. Only when the bone-piercing cold wind approached him did the steward believe that the talisman masters had said that there were many ghost spirits gathered outside. He was just an ordinary person, so he couldn't see where the ghost spirits were. He could only feel the piercing coldness pressing on his skin. Trembling, he raised his head. He didn't know that a group of strange-looking ghost spirits had already crowded around him, practically blocking the entire room. Shunfei swallowed her saliva. She felt a bit strange. Previously, when these ghost spirits were outside the residence, each and every one of them had impatiently rushed inside. Now that they had finally rushed to the front of the main body, they shrank back and didn't move. Even the ghost spirits knew who was easy to bully and who wasn't to be trifled with, right? It could be said that it was estimated that all the ghost spirits within a radius of 100 li around the southern city had already gathered in this room. The ghost heads were all restless. The dozen or so ghost spirits floating in the front row were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. Suddenly, they screamed sharply and rushed to the side of the bed. Although they felt danger, the ownerless body in front of them really made them drool with excitement. It was as if, as long as they could obtain this ownerless body, they could have anything in the world. A bunch of enchanting black flames emerged from Emollien's fingers. That speck of fire abruptly expanded, forming a fierce black tiger that eyed Emollien covetously as it crouched next to his leg. A series of rapid howls came from the air. The black tiger opened its huge mouth and pounced, swallowing the dozen or so ghost spirits in front of it into its stomach. Of course, this was only what Shunfei, Feng Su, and Uniku saw. In reality, the black holy fire had taken the form of a ferocious tiger and burned the dozen or so ghost spirits into ashes. Emollien gently put down Arbor, who was lying horizontally in his arms. He didn't seem to move, but in the next moment, he was in front of the many ghosts. His robes fluttered even though there was no wind. Black sparks of fire quickly formed a circle around his body. They exploded at the same time. Streaks of terrifying black flames mercilessly engulfed the ghost spirits in front of them. When he was doing this, there wasn't the slightest fluctuation of emotion in the depths of his eyes. "Crown Princess!" Shunfei cried out in surprise. A few little ghost spirits were seen rolling and crawling as they slipped through the gap in the door. They greedily rushed towards Arbor's body. At the same time, an aurora suddenly rushed out from Arbor's body. The ghost spirits who were forced to retreat outside the door by the holy fire didn't know what was going on. They found that their bodies had completely disappeared in the aurora. Chapter 2393. This was really a very sad thing. They had finally managed to save their lives from the terrifying black fire. But unexpectedly, in the next second, they were annihilated by a kind of terrifying aurora of heaven and earth. Their souls were scattered into the air, and they were done for. If one looked carefully, the moment these spirits dissipated at the last moment, they could almost form all kinds of emoticons. Bang! Before Shinjun and the others could see clearly what happened, they felt themselves being thrown out of the door by a shock force. 2 pieces of door planks and a screen were thrown over one after another, blocking the door and cutting off everyone's view. After Fong Su, Eunuch Hu, and the others were driven out, they all looked at each other in dismay. Emolien had thrown everyone out of the room the moment the aurora occurred. He was very sure that those people were only blinded by the aurora for a moment and did not really see clearly what was inside the little girl's body. Prince Emo walked to the side of the bed and sat down. He stretched out his finger to stroke the little fellow's fair and peaceful face, his gaze calmly lingering on her dantian. There, he could clearly see a ball of white light suddenly appear, and all the spirits turned into ashes in this light. Thinking back to when Jojo's spirit dissipated in the underground base of Daizong Mountain, Emolien was almost certain that this ball of white light in her dantian was protecting her body. What was this thing? His finger gently stroked her lower abdomen, but he did not probe further. It was better to wait for Jojo to wake up before telling her and let her investigate it herself. Still not coming out. His cold and stern voice rang in the silent room. As soon as his words fell, the whole room was silent, as if the air had also solidified. Rustle, 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 rustled. After a series of crawling sounds, the little trant slowly crawled out from the hair behind the little girl's neck. Its pair of eyes looked somewhat timidly at Emolien. Seeing the man's cold and stern gaze sweep over, Chocho suddenly had an impulse to flee. I was only able to come out just now. The little trant hastily crawled out from behind Chiao Mu and jogged up to Emolien. It tugged at his sleeve and fluttered before flipping over and jumping onto his arm. Emolien glanced at him coldly. Chocho hurriedly poured out everything it could and couldn't. Master's soul has left her body. But don't worry, Master is completely fine. Not only is she fine, but her spiritual sense is also increasing. The more Chocho spoke, the more excited it became. Beaming with joy, it said, I just cut off contact with her. Her spiritual sense body ran away with her soul body. But it's fine, Master. Focus. Chocho swallowed his saliva. Focus, focus, focus. Master is fine. She's fine. This will be a very good cultivation journey. Although her cultivation base didn't increase by much, her spiritual sense, has skyrocketed all the way. If this goes on, maybe her spiritual sense can break through to deity realm first. Think about it. Chocho's face was full of excitement. It tilted its head and said, whose spiritual sense body can break through to deity realm first before someone who hasn't broken through to deity realm cultivation base? Only our little Master Silver can do it. Where is Jojo now? Emolien couldn't stand this long-winded Chocho who didn't get to the point for a long time. She angrily yelled at him. Chapter 2394. The little trant shrunk its neck. With a timid look, it looked at the man whose expression was so cold that it was somewhat frightening. Chocho shrunk its head and glanced at the man pitifully. Mistress, I don't know. You don't know? Emolien didn't get angry and merely uttered these 4 words slowly and faintly. But for some reason, Chocho felt a chill on the top of his head, as if in the next instant his head would be twisted off by the man in front of him and kicked like a ball. You can't hit me. If you hit me, you'll regret your bad luck. My little mistress won't forgive you. Cho carried Miss Chiao's banner and cried out anxiously. Where's she? Emolien asked coldly. In a very, very cold place. What do you mean? Tell me clearly, why did she leave her body? Why did she go to that cold place? Cho swallowed his saliva. What was going on? Lord Cho was actually frightened by this stinky human in front of him. This fellow spoke so logically, grasping the main point in one go. Cho could not fool him even if he wanted to. Emolien raised her eyebrows and stared coldly at Cho in front of her. Cho drooped its little head listlessly. Actually, I am not that sure either. Seeing the man in front of him reach out as if to pinch it to death, Cho jumped in fright and hurriedly explained, Mistress left her body because she wanted to train her spiritual senses. Her spiritual senses are about to break through to the godly realm. Perhaps even she herself is not aware, but the truth is, once her spiritual senses reach the godly realm, she will naturally return to her body. Cho finished speaking in one breath and looked down, his two little branches hanging down and his expression saying that he had already confessed. What attracted her over? Cho's two beady eyes abruptly bulged. How did you know? Fuck. That man had tricked it into revealing everything with one sentence. Cho used its two branches to viciously hit itself and looked at him with an expression that wanted to cry but had no tears. Still not speaking? Emolien said coldly. This little fellow still wanted to play these tricks in front of him. That sneaky look of his had already exposed him. Cho looked at Emolien pitifully. It's not Cho's fault. Speak. A certain person's patience ran out, and he shouted angrily. Cho rolled onto his arm and pretended to use its two branches to cover its non-existent ears. After the primary silver leaves the body, it should be around the body, tempering the body of spiritual sense. It's only because little third called out to her that she floated to that place of extreme cold. Who is Xiao-san? Emolien curled her lips. Her tone sounded rather calm, but Cho was trembling like a little sieve. She felt that the man in front of her was inexplicably terrifying. Strange, why did it feel like Xiao-san was trying to stir up trouble? Xiao-san is Cho's holy wood. Seed fragments. This time, she confessed everything in one breath. After speaking, she even secretly sized up Prince Mo's calm and unperturbed expression. She only felt that this man in front of her was so shrewd that she couldn't even tell what he was thinking. Cho was a little scared. If only Lord Jojo was here right now. Chapter 2395. In front of Sir Jojo, the Crown Prince would definitely not reveal such a terrifying expression. This two-faced person, this terrifying bad boy, had been glaring fiercely at the little tree. When Little Master returned, Cho would definitely sue him. Evil. Obscene. Emolien pressed the little fellow down with a finger and asked coldly, Can you determine her exact location? I'm not sure. Very good. Emolien did not say anything, only gently stroking the little tree's head. The little tree felt that its head was a little pitiful, as if it was in danger of being crushed by someone at any time. Little 7, Prince Emo calmly called out. Do you know what to do? The Crown Prince looked at the little treant warmly. Cho shuddered and reflexively carried its little master into Paradise Planet. Did he dare to say that he did not know? In the blink of an eye, the people kneeling in the courtyard heard a loud bang. A golden light rushed out of the side room, broke through the roof, and flew up. Fong Su frowned. When he saw clearly what was hovering above his head, he jumped up in shock and hurriedly ran after it, waving his hands and shouting, Your Highness! Your Highness! Zohuan, the 8 of you will go to the imperial capital on your own. Emolien stood on Little Seven's back and instructed with a bland expression. There was no superfluous explanation, nor was there any nonsense. It was purely an instruction. Yes. Zohuan obeyed and did not ask any unnecessary questions. Eunuch, who also stood up in a panic and hurriedly shouted to the crown prince on the dragon's back, "Your Highness, where are you going? You can't just leave like this. His Majesty is waiting for your return in Dragonflame City." "Ah, Your Highness, Your Highness." They stared blankly at the indifferent master, who didn't even spare them a glance out of the corner of his eye as he rode away on the dragon. Eunuch, who was on the verge of collapsing, Fong Su, Commander Fong, was also on the verge of a mental breakdown. At this moment, other than going crazy, he felt that there were no words to express his feelings at this moment. The willfulness of His Highness had already completely exceeded his expectations. Although the heirs of the various princes in the capital were arrogant, they had never been like this before. He clearly knew that the great emperor had been waiting for him in the imperial capital for a long time, but he still did things his own way. He did whatever he wanted to do and ran away without any explanation. How could they endure this? Mo Lien stood on the dragon's back, his eyes indifferently looking into the distance. The gusts of wind that were blowing in his face were completely blocked by him. His hair and clothes were not messed up at all. "I remember that there's an extremely cold place in the Tsang Prefecture," Mo Lien said with an indifferent expression. "The heavenly ice and snow region." Little Seven made a beautiful tail swing and leaped into the sky, drilling into the clouds. Whoosh! A purple feathered arrow brushed past a patch of snow, splashing bits of cold light, and pierced into the hind leg of a snow deer in front of him. The snow deer neighed and immediately fell to the ground, unable to get up. Its hooves crawled twice in the snow, whimpering sorrowfully. Chapter 2396. The third prince was in high spirits as he led a group of guards forward on horseback. He led the people to surround the snow deer. Everyone raised their bows and howled, their voices shaking the heavens and the earth. A bunch of idiots. Miss Chow glanced at them. Those who didn't know better would think that they had hunted a snow leopard, a group of people besieging a low-level spirit beast. The snow deer, which had no offensive power, shot 18 arrows consecutively and barely hit its target, but with such archery skills, it was better not to come out and embarrass itself. Rong urged his horse to follow beside Prince Chun. When he turned back, he saw the undisguised contempt in the little ferret's eyes. Why did he feel speechless for some reason? Even a ferret knew how to despise people these days. "Little furball, what do you like? I'll shoot it for you to play with." Duanyu reached out to stroke her furry head as he stared at the icy plains in the distance. The little fellow lazily crawled on her paw. "Should I tell the truth? I like super large ice wolves, snow leopards, and big tigers the most." The problem was that this bunch of weaklings only hunted small animals all day long. She didn't like any of them. "Look, there's a white-furred silver tiger over there. I'll shoot it down for you to play with, okay?" Duanyu pointed ahead. Sure enough, a vigorous tiger had appeared in the icy plains at some point in time. Third Prince and the others were already on high alert. They stared cautiously at the tiger, afraid that it would suddenly pounce over. Hearing the sound of hooves, Third Prince turned to look and saw Duanyu spurring a polar ice wolf to gallop past them. That was a level 10 spirit beast, right? Third Prince's pupils contracted as he inwardly thought, "If you court death like this, the tiger will kill you one day." Rong was startled for a moment, and the corner of his mouth silently twitched. He glanced sideways at the little ferret in Prince Chen's arms, then looked up at the white-furred silver tiger squatting on the icy plains and eyeing them covetously. A trace of doubt flashed through his mind. "Are you sure you're shooting a silver tiger for the little ferret as a pet, and not the little ferret for the silver tiger as a pet ferret? Forget it. I'll follow them to take a look, lest this willful and reckless prince get hurt." 2 streaks of light had already shot out from Duanyu's fingers, smashing into the silver tiger's feet with a loud bang. This suicidal provocation infuriated the silver tiger, and it abruptly roared. With a leap, it scuttled down from the icy plain and made a beeline for Duanyu. Just as the polar ice wolf and this white-furred silver tiger were about to collide, Duan Yu leaped up with a little ferret in his arms. He revealed a jade bamboo tube from his sleeve and abruptly shot it at that extremely pitiful silver tiger. They were so close to each other. The explosive power of the 9 jade heavens thunder flung the silver tiger away. It smashed into the thick layer of ice with a bang. Keek, with such a huge impact, it would be strange if the layer of ice did not crack. The silver tiger's expression was also very strange. When it realized that the layer of ice under its body was breaking, it hurriedly crawled with its claws, dragging its painful body, and hurriedly jumped onto another intact piece of ice. Without another word, it turned its head and fled with its tail between its legs. Fuck, the current human was too treacherous. He didn't even use spiritual energy to fight with you. Who knew what he flung at me? But it turned all my snow white fur black. The white-furred silver tiger leaped from one piece of ice to another. It finally jumped over the broken ice and madly sprinted towards the depths of the icy plains. Unexpectedly, it had only run a few steps when it looked up. Chapter 2397. To its surprise, it saw that grinning human standing in the air before it. When did he run in front of it? Roar! The white-furred silver tiger roared, but the trembling in its roar simply made it blush. What was going on? It was actually frightened by this tiny human, to the point that its organs were about to fall out. A fan had already appeared in Duan Yu's hand, and he winked at the silver tiger with a grin. Are you going to submit, or should I beat you until you submit? The little fellow was curled up in his arms. Even if he didn't look at her, he could sense her happy mood. That pair of beady eyes must be staring intently at this ferocious tiger right now. He knew she liked it. Duan Yu smiled. The white-furred silver tiger really wanted to resist again, but when the man revealed that piece of jade in his sleeve, it looked at its fur flying all over from the explosion. It involuntarily sprawled on the ground. It absolutely wasn't submitting to evil forces. MHM, absolutely not. It was just that there was a saying among humans. A wise man submits to circumstances. The tiger had a flash of inspiration as it thought this. When Sir Jojo returned, he had an additional mount. The little fellow swaggered as she squatted on the silver tiger's head, and they returned to the camp while being watched by everyone. When someone asked, Duan Yu told everyone, Little Jiao made a great contribution, so this is her reward. Everyone's jaws dropped to the ground. They didn't understand His Highness Prince Chen's scheme. His reward was a ferocious tiger mount, but he didn't feel that the little fellows but was uncomfortable. Sir Jojo naturally didn't care about these people's probing gazes. She was now also a person who reared a tiger. Oh no, a ferret. The little fellow didn't know that she had already exposed herself to Duan Yu. After washing herself clean, she let the maidservant at the side wipe her fur. Clean and tidy, she slipped into the bed and lay there motionless. She didn't know why, but she kept feeling like she was exhausted every time she woke up these past few days. It was as if she hadn't rested well, even in her dreams, and always looked tired. His body was really too weak. Even after sleeping for so long every day, he still looked sleepy. Miss Chow had no idea that little Martin's body did not have enough rest because her soul had been tossing and turning in and out of his body. Late at night, it was raining heavily outside. The bean-sized raindrops hit the tent and woke Miss Chow up. When she opened her eyes, her soul had already slipped back into little Martin's body. Outside the tent, a person came in against the moonlight and braved the rain. With a head full of wet hair, he went forward and pulled her out of the warm blanket. It's time to go. Isn't it still dark? Why do you have to leave now? The little girl was extremely sleepy. Duan Yu poked her forehead with a smile. All right, continue sleeping. After saying that, he took a small blanket and wrapped her up. He stuffed her into his arms, leaving her two sleepy, beady eyes exposed. The little fellow propped up her eyelids. Unable to withstand the tiredness, she went back to sleep. When Duan Yu carried him out of the tent, horses were already neighing and moving outside. The sudden torrential rain made everyone a little flustered. Snowflakes gradually gathered in the rain. It looked like the weather would continue to deteriorate. Roar! The little fellow waved her paw at him. Where's my little tiger? That was her mount. Chapter 2398. Duan Yu pressed down on her small head and stuffed her into his embrace. It's cold. Don't worry, your tiger cub is following behind. It definitely won't fall off. Only then was Miss Chow satisfied. She shrunk her head into his embrace and even purposely tugged at his lapel to block the whistling cold wind above her head. This body of fur really can't withstand the wind, the little girl thought unhappily. She wondered how her body, which was left behind in the divine province, was doing now. Why do we have to move in this weather? Commandery Princess Xiangchang's shrill shriek came from the camp. Although the maidservants held 2 umbrellas for her, her clothes were still half soaked from the howling wind and torrential rain. It was very uncomfortable to stick to her body. Commandery Princess, it's the Emperor's order. I heard that the Board of Astronomy calculated that the weather will be even worse in the future, so we must leave now. Commandery Princess Xiangchang stood there and cursed before getting into the carriage in irritation. The boundless icy plain was currently covered in rain and snow. At first glance, it was foggy, so it was impossible to see the road clearly. Thankfully, other than those delicate royal concubines, everyone else had decent cultivations, so most of them didn't have much of a problem traveling on a rainy day. Duan Yu was worried about his mother, so he mounted the ice wolf and ran to his mother's carriage to instruct the coachman. Because the rain and snow were too heavy, even though he was wearing rainproof clothes, his clothes were almost completely soaked. Noble Consort Duan sat inside the carriage and worriedly lifted the curtain. She called out to him, Ali, the rain outside is too heavy. How about you also get in the carriage? No need, mother. There were other women in the carriage, so it was naturally very inconvenient for him to get in. It wasn't until the group started moving that Duan Yu returned to the Emperor of Cangzhou. Dressed in martial attire, the Emperor was riding on a level 12 mystic horse as he narrowed his eyes at the road ahead. They originally planned to set off today, but this vile weather came unexpectedly, so he ordered them to prepare to set off before daybreak. Although it was difficult to travel on rainy and snowy days, how could the children of Cangzhou be so delicate? The group packed up the food, utensils, and other things. They left the tents there and followed the great emperor back. At this moment, an official from the imperial astronomer, with a solemn expression, walked forward and saluted the emperor in the rain. Your Majesty, please give the order to set off quickly. Judging from the weather, a blizzard would arrive in less than 2 hours. At that time, the journey will be even more difficult. And the official's face was full of worry. This humble official thinks that if there is a hailstorm halfway through, the ice layer below will collapse. At that time, the official didn't continue, but the meaning behind his words was clear. If they encountered a large hailstorm and broke through the ice layer, the ice field would collapse and the land beast would not be able to walk. The great emperor's expression changed slightly. Pass down the order. Prepare the flying beasts in advance and be on standby. Let's go. In this kind of weather, flying in the rain on a flying beast was obviously even more unwise. The team had been on the road for less than 5 minutes when it was obvious that God was up to something. Several bolts of lightning crashed down with a rumble, causing everyone's expression to darken. A bolt of lightning landed beside the carriage, smashing a deep hole in the ice layer. The horse's hooves were raised in fright, and the carriage driver desperately tried to control the reins. The great emperor hastily shouted, "Go! Great! It didn't even take 2 hours." The hailstorm didn't fall, and a thunderstorm attacked. Chapter 2399. The lightning struck the glacier, creating several deep craters in it. Everyone only felt the glacier beneath their feet tremble, and cracks that were clearly visible to the naked eye blossomed with a series of terrifying crackling sounds. It was as if everyone would fall into the depths of the icy plains in the next instant. The horses neighed in fright, and the women and children screamed repeatedly. Poof! A tender green thing suddenly shot out from behind the crowd from a crack in the icy plains and whipped the horses, but with a smack. That unlucky spirit stallion immediately neighed in fright and kicked its front legs. The third prince, who had been sitting upright on the horse's back and doing his best to restrain the horse's agitation, instantly tilted his body along with the upright spirit stallion. Waves of dizziness hit his mind, and a trace of alarm flashed through his eyes. What a joke! How could a good-for-nothing level 5 little mystic cultivator like him withstand this kind of stimulation? Just as he was about to be jolted off the horse, several guards immediately galloped over. One person held his horse down, while the others reached out to support him. The third prince panicked and lost his head as he shouted several times, "Protect your highness! Protect your highness! Protect your highness! Protect your highness!" The little fellow crawled and revealed two beady black eyes to glance at the retarded third prince in the carriage. She then looked up to see the indifferent and nonchalant Duan Yu, and several thoughts immediately flashed through her mind. The dragon has 9 sons, and each one is different. Bad bamboo shoots produce good bamboo shoots, and a crooked melon can at least grow a divine flower from a snowy region. Although her long hair was drenched by the rain, her pair of peach blossom eyes appeared even colder and brighter, giving people a feeling that she was fearless even in the face of great difficulties. Duan Yu's fingers subconsciously rubbed her head that had popped out. He held the reins with one hand and turned to speak with vassal Prince Rome, who had caught up. The group then braved the rain and led the carriages toward the icy plains. A white light suddenly flashed across the horizon, instantly illuminating the icy plains in front of them. A bolt of lightning as thick as the mouth of a bowl drew a crack in the sky and fiercely struck the thick layer of ice. Immediately after, more than a dozen green vines shot out from under the layer of ice, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws to block the carriage's advance. Because the rain was too heavy, the little fellow had already shrunk back into Duan Yu's arms, so she simply did not see the vines shooting out from under the layer of ice to attack. The horses neighed incessantly, and a few Tsang province guards were flung off the back of the spirit stallions. There were even a few horses that couldn't be controlled. They ran wildly with their riders and fell into the cracks in the ice. Both the riders and their horses disappeared without a trace. One of the generals leading the group said with a cold expression, "Everyone, surround him. Protect his majesty and the concubines. Don't panic. Maintain the formation and keep moving forward." Clap! A bolt of lightning struck the side of the carriage. The coachman gripped the reins with all his might. His face was pale as he tried to control the speed of the carriage. Duan Yu's handsome face darkened as he commanded a group of Sangzhou guards to step forward to protect her. Afterwards, he patted the head of the polar ice wolf beneath him. With a wave of his sword, he severed 3 to 4 vines and leaped over the intersecting faults, landing firmly on the ground. "What's going on?" The second prince, who was being protected, was in a state of panic. His face was a little pale. "What's under the ice? If elder brother has the leisure to figure out this matter, why don't you run faster and not cause trouble for others?" Duan Yu revealed several porcelain-like teeth at him with a spurious smile. The second prince's face darkened, and he was very unconvinced on the inside. Chapter 2400. Although the second prince was aggrieved, he couldn't refute. After all, he was the same as Old Third, a novice mystic cultivator. Whenever his cultivation was mentioned, he would feel stifled and flustered. But could this be blamed on him? This was completely due to his innate talent. All right? His innate talent was not good, so it could only be said that he was born without the fate of cultivation. However, it was already heaven-defying luck that he could be born into the imperial family. I'm afraid the thing under the ice is about to come out. Rome cracked his whip and chased after Duan Yu's polar ice wolf. "We can't continue like this. The caravan is too slow. Organize a group of people to stay behind to cover the retreat," Duan Yu ordered coldly as he glanced at Rongqing. Don't pick on crooked melons and split jujubes to discuss people. Rongqing was speechless. She nodded and galloped away on her horse. Not long after, he returned with an elite team. That's all the manpower we can muster. The rest will have to protect His Majesty and the concubines of the various palaces. Enough. Duan Yu nodded. We will stay behind to block the thing that burrows out from the ground. Let the others follow His Majesty first. As they spoke, the rumbling of hooves came from the distance. Rong narrowed his eyes. It seems to be that bunch of brats from Ming Province. Don't mind them. Duan Yu glanced over. Do as I say. Rong nodded and arranged for people to follow the caravan. Meanwhile, he led that elite team of more than 20 people to stay by Duan Yu's side. He summoned a long sword that was overflowing with light from his conscience. We haven't been able to compete properly before. Today, I'll show you the gap between us. Duan Yu glanced at him from the corner of his eye and harumphed in high spirits. He suddenly leaped up from the polar ice wolf and pounced towards several vines that had twisted into a ball. Rong didn't get angry and remained aloof. He nodded and said, All right, this one will wait and see. Swish! A cold arrow shot over first, shooting that ball of rattan branches into pieces. Ming Yasi's arrow came so quickly. Compared to several days ago, he seemed to have recovered quite a bit. Duan Yu creased his brows, but he didn't waste words with him. He directly flicked his sleeve and threw several jasper beads into the emerald green bamboo tube. Duan Yu's motto was to never waste any of his divine energy when he could throw a concealed weapon. Boom! Following the explosion of the jade heavenly thunder, the spirit stallion let out a miserable shriek, and the troops behind Ming Yasi were thrown into chaos. The jade heavenly thunder was flying towards him. At that moment, he felt his heart tighten. He had already abandoned the polar ice wolf under him and flew up. The first to bear the brunt of this attack was the polar ice wolf. It collapsed to the ground, whimpering as it struggled at death's door. Clearly, it was on the verge of death. Ming Yasi floated to the ground and glared at Duan Yu with gritted teeth. This guy's level of treachery had practically exceeded his imagination. The people of the Divine Prefecture and the Cangzhou were all so cunning. Duan Yu did not look at him, and the raven bone fan in his hand flew out, severing several vines. This time, it seemed to have angered the huge monster under the ice. Countless vines burrowed out again and viciously whipped at the people in front of them at a frenzied speed. Audacious humans, you actually dared to offend Lord Holywood. I'll whip you to death. Swish, swish. Swish, swish, swish. All the vines rushed towards Duan Yu at once, and a few even aimed for his chest. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.